to stay.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Boards, a podcast dedicated to the actions and interests of skaters beyond skateboarding. My guest today, Esther Sayers, is an artist, researcher, gallery educator, lecturer, and skateboarder from London, England. She picked up her first board in 2017 at the age of 47 and has been obsessed with the practice, history, community, and culture of skateboarding ever since. Among many other things, she has been involved with the Hackney Bumps Regeneration project and is also a co-founder of City Mill Skate, a research project that has used a shared design process to build and realize a proposal for the construction of semi-permanent skatable objects within the new University College London campus, also known as UCL East. I had the opportunity to sit down with her for a nice chat to talk about how empowering skateboarding has been in her life in recent years. So here's my conversation with Esther. I hope you'll enjoy it. Yeah, so from what I saw, your studies were in art. You studied, I think, 3D design and then fine art in the early to mid 90s.
Late 80s to early 90s.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I had to write it down this morning. That's why I've got it here next to me, because I was kind of, I need to actually think through all of this stuff and remember. Yeah, anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, all good. And so, I saw that some of your first work experiences after studying were as an artist educator for the Tate Liverpool and then Tate Modern in London. I actually wanted to ask you, what exactly is an artist educator? I wasn't too sure what that job kind of entails.
Yeah, so it's a term that's often used in art galleries for the people that come in to do the education workshops in the gallery in front of the artworks, but they tend to employ people who are practicing artists because they want you to come in with and kind of make a connection between your own artwork and the work in the gallery. So I was really lucky that when I had my master's final exhibition, I did an MA in fine art, and I'd made very, very large photographs, kind of 8-foot tall photographs with light behind them. And they were all about kind of self-portraiture. They were all about identity in the body and trying to kind of think about how we form our own identities. And someone came along to that exhibition who was putting together a team of artist educators to work on an exhibition at Tate Liverpool. It was an exhibition of Susan Hiller's work. And I found Susan Hiller very amazing artist, and I respected her work greatly. So I was really excited to be on this. And the person who was putting together the set of artist educators said that she saw a connection between my work and Susan Hiller's. So could I come along and kind of get involved in doing that in the gallery, which was great, but terrifying because I had never done anything like that before. I'd done workshops in schools where I was teaching people to do art, but I hadn't been in the gallery where you're kind of using activities to hook people in, to engage them with the artwork, to get them talking, to get them having discussions and ultimately making meaning, making interpretations of the works. So that's the job of the artist educator, really, is a kind of mediator between the artwork and the viewer, the audience that are coming in, as a sort of person who is a catalyst to conversations, really.
Okay, interesting. And so you did that for a few years, and I'm not going to mention everything you've done because you have a long resume, but some of the things I wanted to mention is also, so you worked at the Tate Modern, as I just mentioned, but you were also a curator for young people's programs over there for about 10 years, more or less.
Yeah. It kind of happened that I moved to London because I got a job in an education department at a small art gallery called Camden Arts Centre.
Oh, yes.
And I was I'd been living in Stoke-on-Trent, and I'd been working as a kind of jobbing artist in galleries, in schools, in youth centres, in anywhere that would pay me a little bit to do this thing. And then I found this job that would give me a little bit of more of a secure income. So I worked for 3.5 days a week in this small but very highly respected art gallery in North London. And then I started to do some gallery education work at Tate Modern, leading workshops for the youth programme, which was Tate Modern opened in 2000, and I started to work there in 99. in a porter cabin at the back of the gallery that was still a building site, because they wanted an artist educator to come in and work with a group of young people that lived in Southwark, South London, local to the gallery, who they wanted to kind of advise them on what the new gallery should be like and how it should sort of organise its activities so that they were appealing to young people. So I went there to start working on that. So I was very much a freelance artist coming in to work on this engagement programme. And then I did that for 2 years after the gallery opened in 2000. And then in 2002, the curator for youth programmes moved on to a different position and that post became open. Okay. And I was starting to think about the future and buying a house and these kinds of things, and suddenly I need to get a mortgage. That means I need a job that actually... So there were quite a lot of life events that meant that I made a decision that it was the right time to apply for what I thought of as a proper job, a kind of salaried position. And I was very lucky, delighted to get the role because it was a fantastic job to do, and I did it for 10 years after that. Right. I bought a house and was able to pay into a mortgage and do all those live things. But I think doing that for 10 years, working with a group of about 25 young people between the ages of 15 and 23 to help them to run a programme for their peers was really kind of life-changing for me in terms of work that I've gone on to do in community engagement and stuff like that. So I'm pleased to have done that. And it became the basis of my PhD research. I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't done that job.
That's right, yeah. That's also something I wanted to mention, your PhD. I saw it was in philosophy as well, but I wasn't sure what the theme was, kind of. But you did that between 2008 and 2013, I believe, so while you were working for Tate Modern.
That's right, yeah. And actually, so I was working for Tate Modern and I had my first child in 2005. So I had some time off, maternity leave. Right. And then I came back to work. And it was obvious to me that once you started to take time off for family reasons in the situation that I was working in, you could definitely see your career come to a standstill. And I knew that I could still be doing things even though I was off and enjoying looking after my children. I wanted to do something intellectual as well. So actually, I know it sounds weird, but I signed up for a PhD just after the birth of my second child. He was born in 2007. Okay. So whilst I had time off work, which for maternity is the closest thing in the UK employment sector that you get to having a sabbatical, a kind of research sabbatical. So I combined the two, basically. Okay. So yeah, I did start it in 2008. It's a Doctor of Philosophy, but the subject is art education. That was my subject. So my PhD research is about learning in the art gallery and the way... It's actually about learning about culture. And it's about... My PhD was about learning about the kind of access to that culture and the way that the gallery thought about inclusion, how it would include new audiences in this culture of art that it was showing. So my PhD was really a philosophical look at those kinds of operations within the gallery that were about opening the doors, widening out to a broader public, and actually some of the problems that occurred as a result of that when young people were kind of perhaps falsely invited in. My big example with that is that in 2006 we created a skate ramp outside of Tate Modern on the riverbank. Oh yeah, okay. This was part of our set of events, our initiatives that were about encouraging, drawing in a new audience. And I always worked very closely with the young people that were part of that programme. And they wanted to do a set of activities around the Futurism exhibition, which was coming up. And Futurism was very much about an art form that was about trying to record speed and bodies moving at pace and trying to use sculptural materials and paint materials to record this increasing velocity in the world. So Futurism's coming up. We're talking about what events we're going to do alongside this exhibition, and they say, well, what about skateboarding? Can't we have people skateboarding down the turbine hall? Thought, yeah, great, this could be really, really good. So we took that to the security team at Tate because we had to have things agreed, and they said, no, absolutely not. No way. Too dangerous. No, too dangerous. Travel too fast and all this kind of thing. So I couldn't get it. That was quite difficult for me because on the one hand, the gallery was saying it wanted these young audiences. And on the other hand, when they said what they wanted to do there, the gallery was saying, well, no, actually. Mm-hmm. So we pragmatically worked around that problem, and it ended up with us commissioning a series of ramps outside the gallery, which just quite simply wasn't as good. It was a poor substitute for skating down the turbine hall, right? Mm-hmm. So we did this thing, and what it meant was people did come, people skated it, it was quite busy for the few weeks that it was there. But very few of those people actually then went through the doors of the gallery and into the Futurism exhibition.
Oh, okay.
It was a really difficult task. And it also seemed rather false, to be honest, that you would bring say, hey, we're doing this skateboarding thing, come along. And then you kind of say, but then come in the gallery and sort of leave skateboarding outside. And then can you come and see the real culture? You know, that's your culture, yeah. But then come and see the real culture in the gallery, which is all these kind of ancient artworks. So, I mean, I'm being overly critical because I did a PhD about it, and I became very focused on these problems that I saw when we start to try and include people who don't naturally include themselves. Mm-hmm. And so my PhD was a chance to stop and look at that and think about what had happened there and
examine this incoherence kind of, or...
Yeah. And it's odd to me that at the time I didn't skate. I had no intention of skating. This is just a strange... Well, not strange now that I look back at things, but at the time I didn't see that it was a kind of signpost to something that was yet to come. But interestingly, that was just before, that whole skate ramp outside was just before the birth of my second child. And he is now the 17-year-old that I skate with all the time. So somehow there's this really interesting kind of coming full circle.
Yeah, exactly. Also, you mentioned it throughout our chat until now, but you've been an artist yourself since the 90s, since you started studying art as well. So I believe you do different kinds of art. You do objects using plastic. You've mentioned photographs using large format techniques. You work also on digital images. And I saw also that you do plaster molds for casting objects. And you exhibited some of your work in the UK and other countries in Europe and in the States.
Yeah.
You've been working also at the Goldsmiths University of London, where you completed your PhD, if I'm not mistaken. You've been working there as a senior lecturer since 2012. So I think a year before you completed your PhD. And so you've been working there. So that's what I wanted to mention, just for like your kind of work experiences and stuff until today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think somehow the fact that I've been working at Goldsmiths and within the Department of Educational Studies there is kind of influential on the fact that I've been in the right conditions for my research around skateboarding to flourish. Really, because the department I'm in is connected to learning, to art, to culture, to society, to politics. And I teach art specifically, and I teach art both in practical terms, but also in terms of helping students to see the value that art brings to culture and to society. Mm-hmm. And that is so closely linked to looking at skateboarding and the value that skateboarding brings to culture and society. And so the kind of combination of those two things, and really, you know, there's lots of kind of, we could talk all day about whether skateboarding is an art form or not. I'm not arguing that it is an art form, but I am arguing that it is so closely related when you start to look at culture, society and value. You could be speaking about either, they're quite interchangeable at those points in terms of what they bring and what they offer and what people get from participating in them. But my latter thinking is that skateboarding actually has the edge in that, because skateboarding, where I've talked about those problems of inclusion that I encountered at the art gallery, and people working in art galleries work very hard to overcome those things. in skateboarding, it is inherently exclusive in the sense that you have to participate if you are going to become involved. The inclusion is, it's not a culture, it's not like the art gallery that's standing there with its arms open going, come on, come on. It's more standing there with its arms folded going, yeah, come on, if you want.
Yeah.
But you've got to make the work, you've got to make the effort, you've got to actually do the thing.
Put in the work.
And I find it really fascinating in that way, because I do find it a very inclusive culture, but I also think it's got some quite useful elements of exclusivity that keep it very special and stop it displaying a kind of false generosity, to use a Freudian term for kind of that idea of artificially saying, this is open to everyone, because actually, unless you're prepared to stand on the board and risk the kind of physical dangers, then you're not in. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's come from partly being in the environment that I have been in Goldsmiths, which is an arts-based university, which takes a critical kind of look at society and isn't afraid to talk about the power imbalances and the resistance that exist there. So that's been quite a fruitful environment for me to work.
So, let's talk about skateboarding, I guess. I wanted to ask you about how you got started, because you mentioned the ramps in front of the gallery. That was maybe a first kind of contact with skateboarding from a distance. But you actually started skating, if I'm not mistaken, in 2017 or around there, maybe 2016 or 2018. And you mentioned your son, who actually started skating first, and I read that him skating kind of made you want to try. And you actually started skating with him right as he was starting. And you were, I think, 47 when you started. And I, of course, I find that interesting, because a lot of people usually start skating when they're like teenagers or young children and stuff. But I was wondering if you had ever tried skateboarding before, like stepped on a skateboard when you were a young girl or young woman. Had you ever experienced skateboarding at all until that point?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because I grew up in the 70s in Leeds in the north of England, and in 1977, I can quite vividly remember it. My brother's 6 years older than me, so in 1977 I was 7 and my brother was 13, and he'd just got his first skateboard, and we lived in inner city Leeds. And it was at the height of punk, and my brother was really into that, and all his friends were really into it, and I can remember them actually dressing me up in this kind of little punky outfit and going out with them and doing really kind of rad things like pushing the button on the Pelican crossing and not crossing the road and stuff like this. And I can literally remember this thing. Anyway, in and about all of this time, Dominic had a skateboard, and I remember stepping on it and riding it in the hall in our house, but never taking it any further than that. Unfortunately, in 1978, we moved out of Leeds and we moved to the countryside in Shropshire, where there was no opportunity for skateboarding. And so this skateboard just kind of sat in the house and is still to this day used by my dad when he's moving large pieces of furniture. He gets the skateboard out, and it's a beautiful 70s board with nice big vinyl wheels. So it's still knocking about, but it's really interesting to me that it was there. It almost, had we stayed in Leeds, I think my history might have been really quite different, because we lived at Hyde Park. We lived just up the road from what is now the skate park. It didn't exist then, I don't think. But I think it might have been quite a different history. So no, I didn't actually really start with any conviction until, as you said, 2017, and I was 47. I think I was about a month or two off my 47th birthday, actually. I think I was just about 46. Splitting hairs now. But, I talk to people all the time, say, similar to you said, Quentin, about injury and how that affects a skate life. And I kind of wonder whether there is a finite amount of time that we can have the injuries that we have, and maybe starting later means I can go on longer. I don't know. I'm kind of find it extraordinary that that's actually now 7 years ago. I didn't really expect to skate beyond 50. For some reason I thought, as soon as I got to 50, that would be it. I'd never be able to skate again.
Yeah.
So I skated like crazy for those 3 years because I was just like, I've got to get it all in now. I'm not going to have time to do this once I'm 50.
My window is closing, kind of.
Yeah. Exactly. And then 50 came and it's like, all right, that's okay. That's
what's changed,
Yeah, exactly. But
that's
that was a great, a massive incentive to really learn quickly. And at the time, my children were still at primary school.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that I started because my son and my nephew had started skating, and my smallest daughter, who's younger than him, was also skating. So they were a real incentive for me to kind of watch them having fun and then want to do the same thing. But because they were at primary school, they're still young enough that you need to take them to school and you need to pick them up from school, and it's just down the road. And so I just thought, I just skate everywhere. So I skated with them to school. I would pick them up and we'd skate home together. I just had this mindset of, if I'm going to improve quickly, I have to skate everywhere. I just have to get used to rolling about. And
sure.
That was nice. That was great. Certainly Hackney, East London is definitely not California with its smooth pavements, or what I imagine to be smooth pavements. But that's a great learning experience for the novice skateboarder to learn to hop over tiny little cracks and stuff like that. Dying on the school run is not a good look.
Yeah, that would be a shame, for sure. How old was your son when he started? He was around 10, I guess, around there?
Yeah, he must have been about 9, and so my little daughter would be 6 at the time, and my elder daughter would have been 11. And she skates a bit as well, but she never got into it quite as much as the smaller two. She can just hold her own. She can skate around the pavement, but she never got into. Do
you remember how your kids approached you about starting skateboarding? Did they ask you Mom, I want to get a skateboard? Or do you remember how picking up a first skateboard for them and eventually for you, how that happened?
Yeah. I think it was because my nephew had gotten a skateboard, so he definitely kind of led the interest. So he was doing this thing over there, and they were kind of watching, thinking
intrigued.
That's good. So so they said, I would quite like to have a skateboard. And I'm ashamed, but I did the thing. I fell into the trap that so many parents who don't know do, and we got them a penny board for Christmas. And they're good enough. They rode the penny board down the street and stuff like that. But then my sister-in-law bought a skate lesson for my son and my nephew for his birthday, and they went along, and it was being taught by the fantastic Dave Chesson, who is very kind of well-known ex-pro skater, but also instructor and leader of a skate lesson company called Learn to Skateboard. And Dave just took one look at the penny board. He must have seen them so many times before, and he just said, "We'll just put this over here and you can ride this one today." So it was just like, okay, right, we've got this right. So that was how he got into that. And then he was getting keen, so we did go and really enjoyed taking him to buy a setup
at a skate shop.
Now I can't remember the name of it. Parlour Skates. It was open then. It's closed down now, unfortunately. But it was a great experience, and I remember that being really seminal for me, because I stood in the skate shop feeling kind of nervous because I didn't know quite how everything worked and stuff. But we got Rafi kitted out, and I just felt at home in a funny sort of way, because I felt connected. My teenage and youth was in festivals, and so I did a lot of things at Stonehenge and then bigger festivals, and then that was in the sort of mid to late 80s, sort of 85, 86, and then Acid House came in 88, 89, and I got into that, and it was about raves, and then out of that a kind of clubbing culture, and I was involved in all that side of things, and and then into metal and stuff like that. And then standing there in that skate shop, all these different cultural experiences that have made me who I am felt like they were there. And so a really interesting experience. This kind of culture that I didn't really know anything about was just existing there, almost in the shadows of the place that I lived. And so at that point, the fact that we lived in Hackney, we lived in East London, we lived in a very skateboard-rich area in the sense of it being very much part of a kind of culture here. I started to see it, and I could start to kind of notice it. And So it's so interesting. So that was Rafi's first skateboard, and then
And so, can you tell me about maybe your very first experiences yourself getting on the skateboard? So I read that you started actually rolling like in your kitchen or something.
Yeah.
Just kind of finding the balance and stuff. But when you first started taking it to the streets, did you maybe start rolling around like your house, or did you very quickly go to a skate park? Like, what were your very first moments of skateboarding yourself?
Yeah. So buying this skateboard in Parlour Skates, we then took the kids to Victoria Park and they hung out there for the day. And we, my partner and I and my brother and his partner, sat on a bench and watched them all. And then that was a few hours and we took them home. And then that evening it rained and it was almost dark. And I'd been rolling in the kitchen on this board that we'd just bought him. And I said, I want to go back there. I want to try this. So we all, me and the kids went back to the skate park with this new prized skateboard. And I went down the flat bank. It's a kind of quite mellow flat bank, and went down there absolutely terrified and kind of frozen like wood.
Sure.
Just after it rained, no idea that you weren't supposed to skate when the ground was wet, but loved the fact that the park was empty. That was exactly what I needed. It was nearly dark, so there was nobody there, nobody watching, and that was perfect. So that was a little roll around. But then after that, it was really much more about the pavement outside my house. In the house, skating in the house between the kitchen and the living room. It's a kind of wooden floor, so you could skate between them. And then going to the skate park, going back to Vicky Park, but I would skate the path around the park because I just needed to learn to balance and things, and I didn't want to have to go down any banks at that point, but also I didn't need to jostle for space. I just needed to roll. So So I just found spaces to do that. And we're really lucky that 5 minutes from our house is Hackney Bumps, which at the time had not been renovated. And I'm sure we'll talk about the renovation of that. But back then in 2017, it was several years before the renovations took place. So it was still a really quite
crusty,
underused, crusty, very gnarly surface. You had to spend 10 minutes clearing up broken bottles and
not the best
other things.
First, like terrain to start skating.
I don't know, kind of, not the best terrain, but I tried out a variety of boards and I tried out vinyl wheels and gradually moved to hard wheels. And so vinyl wheels were fine on that terrain. And what was most important for me was that it was empty. I needed to do this in a place that I didn't feel observed. I was being watched.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so actually, when did you start skating in skate parks? Because like, as you just mentioned, when you begin skateboarding, you don't really want to feel judged or observed too much. So, and I think every skater goes through that, and you need to get comfortable just standing on your board and rolling around, and eventually, maybe trying to do a few tricks or just adapting to a terrain with some incline and stuff. So when did you start, actually going inside a skate park and rolling on like different kinds of surfaces and eventually dropping in and learning all that?
Yeah, I kind of feel like it wasn't later that year. It was maybe the next year. I would have to look back. Things happened quite quickly because, as I said, I was just skating all the time.
Yeah.
Either during 2017 or the next year, we started to go to House of Bands. So that was such a lovely indoor space. And they used to do skate lessons at the weekend. And because I had this really interesting introduction where I was learning alongside my children, and we were at the same stage for a bit.
Right,
Didn't last very long, but for a while we were at the same stage. So we used to go to these skate lessons, and essentially I suppose I was taking the kids to skate lessons at House of Bands. But then I did have a good look at the information on Instagram, and it didn't say a particular age range anywhere. So I thought, well, I'll just rock up too and see whether I can join in. And good enough, that's where I first met Dave Chesson, and I was able to join the classes and get involved. So that was the first real experience in a skate park, albeit in the comfort of a lesson. And so you were kind of protected by the fact that everybody was there to learn particular things. And then someone taught me to kick turn. And of course, obviously, the kick turn unlocks kind of everything.
Yeah.
So having learned to kick turn on one of the flat banks in the street section of House of Bands, I was able to then, I wanted to go and practice it. So then I wanted to go to Vicky Park and be actually in the skate park where I could use a flat bank to practice my kick turns. And then I wanted to be back at the bumps, and I would go just on my own. Sometimes the kids didn't want to go. I would just go and be there. I could spend literally 3 hours just kick turning. It's kind of mad now to think of it, but kind of obsessively trying to perfect the thing, you know? But yeah. So then wanting to do things like that started to unlock skate parks and started to make them necessary for me. So already at that point, I'd gone past the point I was ever going to go. When I started skating, I just wanted to roll around the streets. I didn't want to do anything else. I didn't want to go beyond that.
Yeah.
But the kick turn kind of opened it up, and then it was like, oh no, actually, I do like this feeling.
I can take this
progress.
further.
Yeah. I can kind of enjoy this incremental learning experience. And that eventually segued into wanting to learn to drop in, which again I learned at House of Bands. There was a tiny little drop in on the side, and that was a great place to kind of learn there with someone whose hands I could hold and that kind of thing. And eventually progressing to dropping in at the shallow end of the bowl. I think I've dropped in on the side on the higher bit. I do not need to drop in on vert. I just starting at 47, dropping in on a vert. The vert end of the bowl at House of Bands was not on my to-do list, but I still have lots of fun. Never say never.
Exactly. And so I heard I think it was in this interview you mentioned earlier, the Bored Women podcast interview. You mentioned in there that you broke your fingers. I don't know when that was, but and that you had to undergo surgeries on your fingers and stuff. And I was wondering how you dealt with like the physical impact of skateboarding, because it is, as you know, quite takes a toll on your body basically. And especially as we get older and stuff. And so I was wondering how you dealt with all of a sudden, you know, stepping on a board and risking falling and bruising yourself or breaking something. And were you reluctant at all at first when you started skating? Were you feeling like, oh, maybe this is not worth me breaking my bones or stuff like that?
Yeah. Do you know what? I really wasn't reluctant. It's, probably absolute naivety on my part. But because you don't jump in to the deep end straight away, so you kind of begin in this sort of gentle way, and you only progress because you've been sort of spurred on, or you're excited by it. So I guess you don't make that kind of conscious, I'm going to do a dangerous thing now. And I had quite a lot of falls. Learning to drop in, there are inevitably endless falls on one hip rather than the other. So I do have quite unsightly kind of lump on my left hip, which isn't going to go away. But I've kind of accepted that, and that's part of my life transition into skateboarding. That's a badge that I wear with pride. Yeah, exactly, all that kind of thing. But before I broke my fingers, I had actually dislocated my knee dropping in at Vicky Park, and that was quite early on. That was like not even 2 years in. And so I was devastated. I was I dropped in, and my back foot, my kind of tail foot, had just slipped off the board as I dropped in, and I'd sort of crunched and dislocated my knee, and it had torn the MCL a bit, not all the way across, but it tore it a bit. And so I had a brace, and I was out of it for a few months, and I was so devastated by that. But devastated about missing out on this world, this community, this life that I'd just discovered and was so excited by. And I'm so grateful to people around who helped to say, well, don't be a stranger. Come to the skate park. Even though you're injured, you need to keep coming. You need to, why not? Just be part of this. And, and so showing up with this leg brace on for the first time and people greeting me in the same way, which somehow I hadn't felt like people would because I wasn't skating, was just, it taught me so much about the community that I was part of, but it also taught me so much about myself and about my kind of nervousness about not really being a legitimate part of this community, and my goodness, if I can't skate, then how can I possibly kind of rock up and be at these things, and then kind of
be a part of this community if I'm not skating.
And then learning to put that to one side and go, well, actually I can still be involved in this, but I do different things now, and I'm here to support my kids, for example, with the things that they're learning, or I'm here. And it was when I did a lot of reading and began really the kind of focus on working academically in skateboarding and thinking sort of philosophically about skateboarding, because I just had this massive reading list and watching list, and I used that injury time to really kind of work my way through a lot of material that had been sitting waiting for a while. So it definitely wasn't wasted, and that meant that when I broke my fingers a few years later, that was just after the kind of worst part of lockdown, and we were just kind of opening out again in summer of 2020 before things then locked down again. Breaking my fingers was a real shit, to be honest. I was less philosophical on that one, because I was just skating really well. Everything was good. This life was good. And then I bloody damaged myself. Yeah. And unfortunately that took a long time, and they're still quite wonky. But I had to have 4 surgeries. And so that was just irritating, because it wasn't just one injury and you cope with it and it's a few months and you're back. I kept doing that, and I was back, and then they'd say, oh, we want to do another surgery. So then you're down again, and then you're recovering, and then you're back. And then... So that's interrupted the last couple of years, really, in terms of that, until I learned that I had to insist that any surgery must be done with me conscious. Because I realised the reason they were doing so many surgeries was because they kept putting me under a general anaesthetic. And with your fingers, that means you move them because the surgeon moves them for you. And then I'd wake up from the surgery and I wouldn't be able to move them myself. So I insisted the 4th time I must have just awake. A local anaesthetic. And I was awake during the whole thing. God knows how. But we were actually working together, the surgeons and I.
Wow.
I mean, genuinely, we talked about it afterwards. We're talking about, because they didn't know how it had happened. I'd been transferred from one hospital to another. And so it needed me to kind of bring in the history of it and the things that I'd tried before, but right there on the operating table, so that they could take that into account. And
you were like a consultant on the surgery.
Wow. But I honestly feel like that's what happens to you with skateboarding. You become such an expert on injuries and what to do with them and how the body works and things. That idea of becoming a consultant in the operating theatre sort of made sense of that. Anyway,
I don't know if I would want to be awake if someone's operating on my fingers. Like, wow, that doesn't sound like fun.
I do think they give you quite a lot of adrenaline, which somehow allows you to be above the actual situation in some kind of weird way.
Wow, that's gnarly. Okay.
But then there is that thing of coming back. Are you going to come back after your first injury? Are you going to come back, or is that going to be it? And for a lot of people, probably much more intelligent people than me, it's not. No, this is not worth the risk. And yet I felt like I did want to come back, and it was worth the risk. And actually, after the 4th surgery on my hand, I did have a low. And I said to my mum, actually, this is ridiculous. What am I doing at my age? I just should stop doing this. And it was my mum in her late 70s who said, what? No way. Think of all the other things that this brings to you. Think of all the things that you get from this. Why would you let this stop all of that? And that was kind of, brilliant. Thanks, Mum. You've kind of allowed me to take that position and feel like it's the right thing, rather than a kind of irresponsible choice, that there is a good reason for doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's cool that your mom kind of pushed you to keep going, and that's rad. That's super cool.
Yeah.
And so you just mentioned kind of the community of skateboarding, and I was wondering how you first started, connecting with people in the industry, because I first heard about you through Pushing Borders, seeing you on the panel over there. So that was in 2019 in Malmö, and you had been skating for only 2 years at that point.
Yeah.
And so, I was wondering how did you first start connecting with people in the skate community in London and more at large afterwards?
Yeah, I think a few things happened quite quickly. One was definitely the skate classes and going to House of Vans, and that connected me with a kind of network that way. And there was really good girls' nights that happened there and events encouraging women into skateboarding. That was a great connector. And then there was Hackney Bumps, the renovation project had just begun, and Nick Toombs and Greg King had just started to organise meetings, and I'd missed the first meeting that they'd had about it, but really wanted to get to the second one. And I got to the second meeting, was very much wanting to be part of that. I'd been thinking for a while I ought to do something about the renovation here, but I haven't got time. I was in this kind of I need to use all my time learning to skate. I don't have time to get involved in a project. So when someone else had started a project, I thought, great, they're driving this. I can support in the time that I've got. So I went to a meeting, and there I met Daryl Nobbs, who is part of Betong Park. So that connection was made. And then when I was asked to come and do something for the UCL, University College London Public Art programme that was around community building or community engagement through skateboarding on the Olympic Park as part of the UCL East ideas for a new campus, that then meant that I had a reason that I needed to work with Betong Park to develop those things. So kind of those sort of networks came together. But then some really kind of surprising things happened, like travelling to work in South London. I have to go on an overground train, and I used to travel on there daily, reading, as I was, all the books that I could on skateboarding in every spare minute that I had. And I was reading Iain Borden's Skateboarding in the City over a few weeks. And then when I got to my home stop, somebody stopped me and said, "Oh, how are you getting on with that book? Are you enjoying it?" And we got off the train together chatting about the book, and then stood on the street corner outside the station literally for about an hour talking about skateboarding and the book and all this kind of thing. And then this person turned out to be someone called Sam Griffin, who I've then worked with on City Mill Skate.
Yes.
We basically ended up on the train together, just bumping into each other and chatting. Okay.
Wow.
And so it was really interesting that there was various people who've been really, really generous to me. Sam being one, Wig Warland being another, all of the people at Skate School London and countless others. Stephanie Nerding was really influential at that time. There were various people that really generously offered up the culture to me. And I listened like a sponge. I was so interested to hear all about it. And so I just feel like those connections were made just through this kind of sense of moving about in this community and encountering a lot of people who were very open and very keen to talk to me about the history, the stuff I'd missed. I felt like I was sort of wanting to hear the stuff I've missed. And then I went along to Pushing Borders, the first one in London, as a punter, and was just there kind of open-eared and open-mouthed and soaking all of that in.
Yeah.
Even actually cancelled the last 2 days of my family holiday to get to it. I left the family on a campsite in Norfolk because I had to be at this thing. I couldn't miss it for the world. And then when Pushing Borders Malmo happened and I was invited to come and speak on it, I was absolutely kind of delighted, but also gobsmacked in that sense of, oh my God, what have I got to offer to this world? And that was such a hugely generative experience, meeting so many people that I'm still connected to and I'm now working with in various ways. So, the wonderful world of skateboarding and the skateboarding community building is incredible. And somewhere kind of linked into that is something called Skate Retreat, which is connected to Girls Skate UK.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of Girls Skate UK doing these things that were also really influential and really sort of empowering and built my relationship. Yeah.
So yeah, as you said, you've been reading, at least at the time and probably still today, reading a lot about skateboarding. You mentioned Iain Borden's book, and I'm sure you've dug deep into finding a lot of information about skateboarding. And I was wondering if you keep an eye on what's going on in skateboarding these days. Like, do you pay attention to videos that come out or interviews? Because you skate, like you've been skating for 7 years, and your main focus has been on that, on learning how to skate and developing this community that we just talked about. And I was wondering how much interest you had kind of for consuming skate media, I guess, you know, like watching videos, reading interviews and all that stuff. Is that something that you do, or is it maybe not super interesting necessarily and you don't really want to, I don't know, watch the latest video or whatever? Or yeah, I was just wondering what was your kind of take on that?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, there is so much being produced all the time that what I watch is probably quite different to what the next person watches.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And I definitely feel that I'm not watching the things that my son's talking to me about because he's got Thrasher. That's all information to me that wouldn't come to me otherwise.
Okay.
My Instagram feed is much more based around kind of either skate academia or adults who are getting involved in skateboarding or women who are involved in skateboarding. Yeah. And I mean, Instagram does my head in these days because it doesn't give you the broad feed that it used to do, or maybe it's just the way that I search has changed. But I have to seek out that kind of media, the kind of what I would think of as the mainstream media. I have to go to it. It doesn't come to me. It doesn't pop up in my feeds and in my life and things like that. So something like when the Their Skateboards, Ruining Skateboarding comes out, then suddenly, right, this is something that I connect to. I connect to this kind of way of rethinking skateboarding and of being quite ironic about what we expect skateboarding to be, and, you know, just even the title. So suddenly I'm kind of interested in that vein of things where someone's kind of pushing at the conventions, finding that kind of thing really interesting. But honestly, I feel like my kids were saying to me last night, why are you so busy all the time? And I was trying to explain that somehow trying to write, trying to organise events, trying to do research projects, trying to actually do my day job takes up so much of my time that if I've got time to listen to something, I'll listen to your podcasts, to be honest.
Thank you.
Rather than going to YouTube and watching a skate video there.
Yeah.
I guess because I'm coming to this from an academic perspective in that way. But also I think the kind of whatever the kind of messages that the brands want to send out, they don't really hit me. They bounce off me or something. I don't really feel that's speaking to me. It doesn't resonate with me in that kind of way. So I'm using all the time that's available, I feel like, to keep on top of all the things that I want to read, and the list is endless and I'm never kind of managing it, and the things that I want to listen to and watch. And so your question is an interesting one. It's a really good question about the sort of general skate media. I think I watch things when people prescribe them for me. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've had quite a few things prescribed for me. You need to watch such and such thing. Yeah. You need to watch various things. I was listening to Carl Beechey's The Most Fun Thing earlier this year and the end of last year. And it took me ages because I kept having to stop to write down, I'm going to have a look at that.
Like references. Sure.
Yeah, so I'm kind of, I guess, I'm more sort of being led by people that are kind of opening up this aspect of culture to me. So probably the current stuff that hasn't yet been filtered or curated by someone like Carl or others.
And so I read this interview that you gave to Arthur Dorian from Free Skatemag in 2019. So I think that was right after Pushing Borders. I was reading that recently, and I just wrote down a few sentences that I wanted to maybe ask you to kind of develop a little bit, if you don't mind. And this is something that you've mentioned in other interviews. I think you mentioned that as well on the Pushing Borders panel. But I'm just going to quote you from the interview. You said, "When we are in a skate park, a 10-year-old is my teacher sometimes, and then someone else's teacher. And we only take on the role of the teacher for 30 seconds or 2 minutes, at which point we become a learner again, because we're all learning something all the time." And I thought that was interesting, just that vision of skateboarding, that we're all learning all the time, and that we're, whatever our experience or level, I guess, we're always learning, and we're always going to teach some other people. And I was wondering if you had identified maybe other activities or fields that kind of have a similar configuration of teaching versus learning, because that feels quite specific to skateboarding, at least for me. And I was wondering if you had found that in other places maybe.
I haven't thought about it as specifically as that, but I am very conscious that skateboarding is a practice, it's a practical activity, and it links to all the other ways in which we learn skill or technique or to practice something. And art is very much a part of that, and it's the area that I'm most familiar with. So in practical learning, you get to know something by doing it rather than by instruction, or partly it's by instruction. Instruction maybe starts you off on the path to discovery, but then you have to put it into practice and to do it a bit, and then you learn a bit from that. And it's where the teaching of art is as backwards and forwards as the teaching, as learning in skateboarding. I was going to say the teaching in skateboarding, but I even think that just feels awkward because it is never a teacher-learner scenario. It's always a reciprocal thing where this kind of conversational, discursive resonance between people is the thing that is pushing both on. And I see that a lot within art, that their ideas don't just, whatever anybody says, you don't have an idea in isolation. You have ideas because of the way that you interact with your environment, with the world, with other people. These things are always collaborative endeavours. And so if you're kind of upfront about that and sort of aware of it, I think you can see it across art and across skateboarding, that progress, people improving and getting better at something is quicker or more effective or more efficient if both have a kind of goal in mind, both are learning, both are open to that sort of development. And I think quite often education has moved away too much from the practical aspects of how we learn and what we learn, and I'm very, very keen to try and bring that back into the frame. And much of the research and writing and teaching that I do that's outside of skateboarding but still connected is to do with that kind of sense of learning through practice, the way that practical application opens us up to the world in sensory ways, in ways in which we embody experience, and through that we learn, but not in a straight line, not in a kind of fixed trajectory of point A to point B, but by opening it ourselves up, we kind of can connect to various things within our kind of situation that take us into a new space that we haven't discovered before, take us into an unknown space and allow us to rest there comfortably rather than with fear, because we have got some practical skills that can allow us to sort of find our way back again or move ourselves on.
Another sentence I wanted to ask you about is, and we kind of talked about this earlier, but you said, "I can become so obsessed with my skateboard that I don't want to do anything else. I used to go to films and art galleries, and I just don't really do any of that stuff anymore. If I've got any free time, I want to go and skate." But you also have to be able to interact with the wider world, otherwise you'll close yourself off. And I was wondering if that was still the case today, 7 years after you've started skating. And of course, you've been through different phases. You've gone through injuries, so you've had to stop skating for a while and stuff. But I was wondering if you had this obsession that you mentioned. Is it still there, or do you feel like it's kind of maybe mellowed down a little bit since then?
I think injury is a really valuable moment because it makes us pause and it makes us open our eyes and remember what else is out there. I think my hand breaking my fingers coincided, as I said before, with the time when everything was great in skateboarding and I was really skating a lot. But I wasn't really attending to my family life as much as I should have been. And so that really was a kind of watershed moment when I went, hang on a minute, my family relations are not as good as they should be, and that's partly because I've been doing this thing so obsessively. I don't want that life. I don't want a life where I've got an awkward relationship at home just because I'm desperate to go and do something else.
Sure.
I want a balance. So I have, since that point, I really have looked towards having that balance and being present in my domestic environment, and then when I get the time to go skate, really go skate. But I feel that the times, and it's partly because of lockdown as well, in lockdown it was possible to be really, really doing this thing, and then as kind of everything's opened up, and for me life at work has become, it's so busy in lockdown, but it's even busier now. There isn't that kind of time to do that, so I have to do it in kind of pockets.
Yeah, I see.
I was listening to Gustav's interview actually yesterday, and he was talking about something about skateboarding in London where you just go out for the whole day. We go out skating rather than the idea that you just go out for an hour or something. And I really identify with that. So I try and find those whole days because I love to get lost in it. I love the fact that after 3 hours, I've got my confidence back and I'm in the zone, and
You've kind of warmed up to this point.
And I hate that I've then got to go to a meeting or something like that. So I try and kind of carve out these kind of chunky bits of time to allow that flow to come back again. Because I think that level of obsession post lockdown wasn't sustainable anymore. But I still feel like I do skate. I am working on skateboarding as much. At the beginning, I was just skating. That was my work on skateboarding. Now I put as much time into skateboarding, in fact, probably more. But a lot of it is working on skate projects or skate research or writing about skateboarding or reading about skateboarding, those kinds of things. So it's sort of dissipated across. And I think in a way that's maybe a kind of way of growing old with it, is that it becomes part of lots of different activities that are connected to this bigger culture.
Before we do the friends questions, I just wanted to maybe ask you a little bit about Hackney Bumps and City Mill Skate. And you mentioned Hackney Bumps earlier. So Hackney Bumps is actually a skate park right next to where you were. I don't know if you're still living around there, but it was close to where you were living. And I saw this little piece that you sent me, and it was built in 1986 as a BMX park initially. And so I wanted to ask you how you got involved in the Hackney Bumps Regeneration project that you kind of hinted at earlier. Daryl from Beton Park helped some of the locals to renovate the spot or polish the ground and make it more smooth so that it could be more skatable. And so, how did you get involved with this whole project, and where is it at now, kind of?
Yeah, well, I think getting involved was only a matter of time because I think I said earlier, I've been skating there a lot and it had been really valuable to me. I do still live around there. It's still just 5 minutes down the road. Because of the house that we were able to buy that I mentioned earlier, we've been living around here for more than 20 years. Okay. So I really am very kind of entrenched and part of this local area. But there was this skate space that I'd only maybe walked past once before I started skating. So again, that thing of, I see something that I didn't ever see before.
Right, yeah.
And so I started skating there and really enjoying using it, but knowing that it needed work, or that it was special and it ought to be better and better used than it was. When I used to skate there with the kids before it was renovated, we'd always bump into other children who were there really interested in your skateboard. And in fact, when we used to go down there, I always used to take a spare board because there would always be somebody that would come up and say, can I have a go? Can I have a go? And that felt really nice. I felt like I was able to be part of the community that I live in way more by being down there than I would just by kind of walking around the streets and things. And because my kids have been to nursery school and then primary school around here, we would then start bumping into people that they didn't really know, like friends. They didn't know them, very well, but they knew them a little bit. And skateboarding sort of gave us this bridge through which we could kind of spend time together and connect and enjoy things. So there was something really nice about this kind of opening up thing. And when Greg and Nick started to kind of create a sort of interest group really through the meetings that they did. I was like really keen to be involved in that, so kind of went into that situation very much thinking, what can I do? How can I help? What can I offer to this thing? So quite quickly became part of a kind of core group of us that was about 5 or 6 people who met regularly and talked about how to improve the surface, because the surface was just very worn and very gnarly.
Yeah.
And we talked about either pouring concrete on top. Daryl's expertise meant that you could think about pouring a 2-inch skim perhaps over the top, but very, very conscious of the cost of that.
Yeah.
We also costed out getting rid of it and building something else, but nobody wanted to do that because it's a special place as it is.
Yeah.
And then the third option was, well, what about grinding back the surface and doing that? And we have basically rebuilt our house, so I've done a lot with a grinder. I've come through a practical art-based background, worked with concrete quite a lot. So I was kind of interested in it from an artist's perspective as well. So on the first day that we met to grind out a 1 metre square patch to see how that went, I was very much thinking as a practitioner in practical terms about this thing. Used 2 different grades of cutting disc to go from a coarse one through to a smoother one.
Okay.
And then stood back and had a look, and I'd been timing how long it took to grind this 1 metre square patch, and then I can't remember now, it was maybe 5 or 10 minutes to grind out this patch.
Okay.
But then across the whole of the space, which I used to know how many square metres it was.
I think it said 1,200 or something.
1,200 square metres, yeah. I did a kind of calculation in my head of if that took 10 minutes and we have to do that over 1,200 square metres. 1,200
times, yeah.
That is an enormous amount of time.
Not mentioning that it must be exhausting on your arms, and you're bending over, you're on your knees and under the sun or the rain or whatever.
Yeah. In the end, I ended up, as part of the thing, I did like 1 square metre, maybe a tiny bit more, and my back was hurting and my arms were kind of vibrating to all hell. Sure. Yeah. So how Nick and Greg managed to do the whole thing,
it's nice.
Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
But back at that time when we were testing it, for me it felt like this is just not doable. It's too much to try and do this by hand. We would need to be able to raise money to pay people to do work on this, or it's too much work. We need to consider the other options. But because lockdown happened and because Nick and Greg were not working during that time.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That was just a kind of perfect moment, really. It meant that they could...
But they would go there like for 4 hours in the mornings for like full weeks.
Get there at 8 a.m. Yeah, 8 a.m.
That's commitment
midday.
Right there. That's crazy.
I know, absolutely. So when you've got people that are prepared to give that much to something, you're so absolutely, you want to get behind it and do everything else. And I just felt really bad that because I was teaching during lockdown, I had to teach online. I had to learn how to teach a practical subject online. It was really, really horrible and hard and stressy. So I just didn't have the time to go down and help with the actual back-breaking work of polishing. But there were other ways. There were other ways of helping. And I think in many ways it was very useful. A lot of our stuff was about dealing with the council and having to be quite diplomatic in terms of the way that we would get permission to do things, or at least not get stopped from doing things.
Yeah.
And I think there was a few occasions when it was quite useful perhaps to have somebody like me who didn't fit the stereotype of skateboarder.
Of a skateboarder,
who could bring in a kind of the fact that I skate with my family and stuff like that. And that, it's really important that councils and other authorities know that whatever they think skateboarding is, it will always surprise you. It will always turn out something different. And so I think my role in a way was kind of more at that end of things.
And so what's the state of the spot nowadays? Like I checked out the Instagram account and there seems to be a bunch of new kind of, I think there's like a curb and a bunch of different new elements that have been built into the place.
Yeah, that's right. All around the edges. So preserving the bumps as they are in the central part, but around the edges, we started off with a small quarter ramp, and then next to it was a big quarter ramp.
Mm-hmm.
And then another smaller quarter ramp based on the gradient of the skate retreat quarter ramp, which was one that I really enjoyed skating. And now there's a whole corner. So around the edges, there's a lot of fun stuff to skate there, but still with the integrity of the original thing. But it's not finished. There's still plans. There's
still more to come?
Yeah. There's still areas that have not been built on yet. So it's lovely. It's got that feel of a council structure from the mid-80s that has had quite a few DIY interventions over the last few years. And so it's really nice to have that combination of DIY alongside some foundational infrastructure that was kind of gifted to us from the mid-80s.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I wanted to also touch a little bit on City Mill Skate, of course. I saw that it was a research project that has used a shared design process to build and realize a proposal for the construction of semi-permanent skatable objects within the new University College London campus, which is also known as UCL East.
Yeah.
And so it took a few years to build City Mill Pool Street. And can you tell me about that project, how you got involved with that? And
Yeah. I guess it's maybe useful just to have a kind of tiny little backstory in a different project. So I have done quite a lot of work being a kind of arts and education consultant on various arts projects. And I worked on one in Cambridge that was called the Cambridge Public Art Programme. And the funding for that, as is often the case with arts programmes, came from something called Section 106, which is part of the planning permissions programme that comes from local authorities. And Section 106 is about mitigating the impact of a development on the communities that live there.
Mm-hmm.
So the public art programme that I worked on in Cambridge was funded by Section 106 money. I was doing education, kind of basically writing a strategy for an education programme that meant that the community could be engaged in the process of change and development that was happening because of a new bunch of housing that was being built. And so my work on that was using the arts as a mode of community engagement. And then a few years later, the same public art curator was now working at UCL, and she invited me to think about a project that could use community engagement to involve the local community around the Olympic Park in East London in the kind of developments that UCL were making there, because they were building a new campus. And she was interested in the way that skateboarding might be able to be something that became part of this kind of way that the new campus was envisaged as being useful to the community, and particularly the community who weren't going to be at university there, but who were going to use that area of land because it was in their local area. So it kind of came sort of through those kind of ideas, but at that stage none of us knew the scale that it would finally be. In fact, really, we were going to build a few DIY obstacles and do some workshops around those.
Yeah.
And so once I'd been invited to write a proposal for that, I had been having the conversations that I mentioned earlier with Sam Griffin around Iain's book and skateboarding generally. And so I thought quite quickly that I would like to talk to Sam about this and discuss the ideas with him and see what he thinks and see if we can come up with something together. I definitely didn't want to work on it alone, and I definitely, as a new skateboarder, didn't feel it was even appropriate for me to come in and kind of suddenly be making the skateboarding project. I wanted it very much to be about drawing together people who were skating in the local community to give their ideas. So we built the project with that premise, with the premise that we're not the experts here, we're kind of conduits through which people are going to tell us the kinds of things they'd like to skate in the area. So we built the ideas up like that, and we started talking to Daryl and thinking about how Beton Park could work alongside us to do some of these workshops that were sort of DIY focused, basically. And through practically making things together, back to my absolute passion for doing things practically and creating knowledge and understanding practically, we would learn about what UCL could incorporate as architectural interventions into their new buildings. That was our idea, was that the community would do these DIY builds, and then we would be able to say, look, this is a really good thing, people like skating this, why don't you add this to the corner of that building or at the bottom of those stairs? So we really were thinking about this idea of the skate dot as these incidental skatable obstacles that would appear across the campus. So we thought of it as a kind of sculpture trail, really, that you would come across these skatable things. And we were very much drawing from and riffing off of the fact that lots of university campuses have been places for skateboarding or have had architecture that's offered something up to skateboarders that have kind of brought a different sort of use to those buildings, to that architecture, to those campuses. So there's that history, and we wanted to draw on that, and we wanted UCL East to be quite knowingly a space for skateboarding. But in a long project, things don't always work out exactly how you thought, and lots of things got in the way. One was lockdown, which meant we couldn't have workshops, and so we had to think of another way. And so we sent out model making kits to people to make at home. And so individually, people made models of the kinds of things they'd like to skate, and they sent us photographs, and we used those in the design of the skate dots.
Okay.
But then the other really difficult thing is about getting permission to build. And we really struggled to get a site. We struggled over land. We struggled to find land where the landowner would let us do the DIY builds on it, or where it was common land and there wasn't a landowner. And we had about 3 or 4 different iterations of different sites that we thought we would build skate dots on, and in the end we couldn't use any of them.
Okay.
So at this point the project's getting longer and longer, and it's taking much more time than any of us expected at the beginning. Yeah. But we finally get permission to use the meanwhile space that we have used and that City Mill Pool Street stands on, which is basically, we're kind of back to the Section 106 money that I mentioned from the Cambridge project, that this is a way of mitigating the impact of the UCL building developments on the local community by using one of the spaces that is yet to be built on. It will, in a few years, it will have another building put up there. But for now, it lays dormant. And rather than it laying dormant as a car park, which it was before, they gave us permission to build the skate dots on that space and to have it at least animated by skateboarding in the interim time, in the meanwhile time between phases of their building project. And so we had to build the skate dots in one area, which wasn't our original. Our original intention, as I say, was much more informed by DIY and by sculpture trails. We've ended up with more of a skate space. Begrudgingly say skate park. We tried to not do that, but in the end it was either build it here or don't build it at all. So in the end a pragmatic decision says, well,
better than nothing. And
and even so, even though that space was offered to us, it was still an enormous task to gain the permissions and to overcome quite a lot of
obstacles.
Obstacles, were quite a challenge as part of the project. But eventually we did get the permissions, and I see it, though, not as an end. I see it as a beginning, which kind of ties me in for a lot longer and ties in, hopefully, some of the other people that have worked in it for a lot longer. We don't know quite what to yet, but we still haven't quite got the architectural interventions into the building. So I'm still having a hope that we can influence the architecture of the next phase of buildings. That would be great if that was possible. But also, City Mill Pool Street exists on London's Olympic Park. And it's ludicrous that London's Olympic Park doesn't have a space for skateboarding. There is no physical legacy that connects the Olympic Park with skateboarding, and that seems really quite remiss. So I would hope that even once City Mill Pool Street has to be dismantled, that the Olympic Park would have an alternative space where skateboarding could happen. And there's actually a car park at the other end of the park that people use illegitimately in the winter months when it's dark and when it's raining. And unfortunately, people get moved on all the time.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that by the work we've done on Poole Street, which has proven that skateboarding isn't this terrible, scary thing that is going to be really problematic, that we will gradually influence the culture that exists there and be able to say, well, look, can't you just give us a bit of that indoor car park and not move us on? You know, we're not going to cause a problem. So I'm just hoping that it's a stepping stone, really, to creating more legitimate spaces for skateboarding.
Yeah. That's right. And I think you mentioned to me that you're actually going to, not just you, but you're going to be involved in a panel discussion in May over there. So yeah, I was wondering what are the next kind of projects or events that are going to happen around this whole thing?
Yeah, well, I was so pleased. I applied for some funding from Goldsmiths, some internal research funding for practice research, and I applied for it around City Mill, the City Mill Skate Project, and I asked for money to organise a symposium discussion to bring together lots of other people who were working and thinking around the design of skate spaces, the way that research as practice can influence and be part of the development of different things around skateboarding, and also about communities and the communities that evolve out of these spaces that are designed and built. And I'm hoping that through our conversations at the symposium and the conversations that come from the people that attend, we can build a new project and we can actually start to put together some ideas for collaborative working, particularly around skateboarding as practice and skateboarding and practice, in terms of the way that I'm really adamant that research, there's a lot of academic research and not all of it is useful. I'm really adamant that if there's going to be research about something, it has to feed back into the thing that it's researching. It has to do something worthwhile. And so as an artist, as a practitioner, I'm very much approaching it in that way. And I'm hoping that the symposium will allow us to think about the way that research then supports and feeds back into... How does it contribute? Yeah, how does it contribute? Yeah, absolutely. So that's coming up, and that's going to allow us to talk about some of the issues. And then we're also, with City Mill, we formed a partnership with an organisation called Planet Good Earth that are very much about using plants and planting as a kind of learning tool, as part of wellbeing agendas. Planet Good Earth has been set up by Louise, who is a skateboarder and part of the community of years ago, and is very connected to lots of people within the skate community. And she talked to us about how we could bring some of the ideas that had been created for skate dots into a proposal for a garden at Chelsea Flower Show for this year. So Chelsea Flower Show is this big thing run by the Royal Horticultural Society. It's a very well-to-do affair, not something that normally intersects with the skateboarding world. But one of the City Mill's, well, a couple of the City Mill skate dot ideas used a particular sort of curve with a flat bottom. And one of the lovely things about people making skate dots was that they made them out of all sorts of non-art materials because people were in lockdown and they were at home. And so somebody called Emily Badescu, one of our skate dot makers, made this beautiful curved ramp out of a toilet roll. The kind of inside, the cardboard part unravelled, and it makes this really lovely curve. So the original idea for this Chelsea garden was to make a ramp out of natural stone. So hewn out of natural stone that would sit in the centre of this garden and have planting, edible planting all around it.
Yeah, interesting.
Which is really lovely. So in a way, that's a way that City Mill is able to kind of influence other projects. You know, that's not a City Mill project going forward, but it's been influential in the way that and now Beton Park are working with Urban Organics, who did the planting at Poole Street, to create that garden for Chelsea. So I like to think that the ideas have sort of had an impact on other stuff that's moving.
Yeah.
Moving out, moving forwards, yeah.
So yeah, there will be a panel discussion in May, and when will the skatable garden be like accessible and?
Yeah, so the panel discussion is on the 17th of May and has wonderful people like John Dahlquist and Paul O'Connor and Vidya Becker and Beton Park and, oh gosh, I'm going to forget people now, Sander Hölsgens, various of your guests will be speaking at that alongside quite a lot of others. So that's going to be great. And then Chelsea Flower Show is taking place in May. I think it starts on like the 21st of May and runs through to the 25th of May.
Okay.
And the project that we were successful with is called Community Give Back. Mm-hmm. And so that was Chelsea and the Royal Horticultural Society have funded the making of this garden on the proviso that it then, after Chelsea, it moves on and is installed somewhere where it has a community benefit. And we're looking at places in the Shropshire, South Wales border for that site to be found, so that it can go on and continue to offer something up.
Yeah, something I wanted to ask you is going back to the Free Skatemag interview that we talked about earlier. You mentioned in it that you felt somewhat invisible, I'm quoting you, in your mid-40s, and that finding like skateboarding and the embodied experience of it felt quite exhilarating and freeing. And I was wondering if you'd still feel that way about it today, now that it's become more part of your life and your lifestyle and your environment, your day-to-day things that you think about and work on. And what do you think kind of could be your next skateboarding kind of in the future, like something that eventually maybe you'll just stumble upon and will have a similar kind of falling in love with or something? Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I do understand what you mean. I think that's interesting, and you've made me realise that, we do get used to things, don't we? I kind of have gotten used to the way that skateboarding feels. I still feel I'm still very much conscious of that thing where you put your board down on the pavement and you start to skate. That is still as both frightening and exhilarating as it always has been. I have to force myself to do that because suddenly you make a noise in a space that didn't have noise. Suddenly your presence is there and you're rolling, and that makes people look at you. And sometimes I catch a glance and people are looking at me going, what is she doing? And so, there's all those things. And we all inevitably occasionally roll over a little stone and kind of it throws us off. And so navigating how that feels and how suddenly you're performing, and you're not intentionally performing, but you are inevitably performing because you're making a noise and people are looking at you, kind of thing. That's still fresh. That's completely fresh, and I think really, really valuable. And I'm kind of almost, if I had to lose all of skateboarding but one thing, the very last thing that I would keep is the rolling down the street. To me, rolling on the pavement is really where my absolute core is. Partly as transport, but partly just as that kind of navigating the city. The sort of tricks-based thing and what I might do in a bowl comes second to that. So that's the bit. The self-consciousness is important somehow as a way of regulating my own ego, maybe, because you can't pretend that it's a performance, but it's a performance that you can only use the kind of ability to navigate the pavement that you've got, sort of thing, and so that sort of is a real leveler. Whether there'll be another skateboarding, well, I don't know. In the way,
you can't predict
of course,
the future,
that's impossible to say. I did try surfing a couple of years ago. I thought, this is my retirement plan. I'm gonna, when I can't skate anymore, I'll surf. Jesus Christ, I got that wrong. So difficult.
I've never tried, but I heard it's tough.
That is a steep learning curve. I've been lucky enough to go snowboarding a few times. And, well, actually, yeah, I kind of started snowboarding after skateboarding, so I'm even newer to that. But the beauty of snowboarding, well, there's several things. One is that you're always going downhill, so you never have to push up a hill.
Yeah.
You get a lift. That's nice. You get the longest ride ever. And also, you go for an intense few days. So I'm back to that thing about being able to go out and skate all day. And that, I really appreciate that with snowboarding, that I'm there and I'm just doing that.
Yeah.
And life can kind of disappear for that time. It's precious. And for me, what's really important is that I do that with my family.
Oh, yeah.
So it's something that we can all do together. And I guess really that's one of the things that appealed to me about skateboarding, was that we could all do it together. I like those things where we're all challenging ourselves and we're all coping with a different environment and negotiating kind of ecstasy and disappointment collectively. So it's really important. And also I find snowboarding, touch wood, a damn sight easier than skateboarding for the level that I do it at. You know, I can hold my own carving in nice S shapes down a mountain. I don't need to be grinding on any boxes or anything like that, or doing any jumps, and so it's easier, and so in that way maybe it's got more longevity. But anyway, I don't think I'm going to not be able to skate.
Yeah, well, especially if sorry to cut you off, but
no.
You were mentioning that if you only had to keep one thing from skateboarding, it would be just rolling down the street, basically. And that's actually the kind of the only thing I have left now. Like, I can't really do tricks anymore, but I can still roll around, and I can still really enjoy this pure joy of just adrenaline, of feeling the wind in your face and the sensation of rolling. And yeah, I guess that's something you can keep doing until very late in life, as long as you don't fall too much or too regularly or something. But it's interesting, and that is about that joy in your body. Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. I was skating with the wonderful Aurora and Rachel from Keep Rolling, and Aurora was going, "Oh, what are you working on here?" We were at Poole Street, and she said, "I've got all these lists for everywhere I go of things that I'm working on." I was just like, no, I'm in it for the joy that I feel in my body. And so, perhaps, I mean, well, definitely I don't push myself in the ways that other people do, but I definitely feel every single thing about the surface that I'm rolling over and the speed that I'm rolling at. And so I kind of like things that feel good and that look stylish, but they only look stylish if they feel good. So that kind of, that sense of perfecting a move for me is much more about the kind of the dance of it, the feel and the body position, stuff like that. So, and I think that's got massive longevity to it. And bowl riding, in the way that I do it, other than the drop-in, everything else is a carve and a cruise, and I'm not getting on the coping. I'm kind of, so it's more about that dance. Yeah, it's pretty safe. As long as you don't hit a rock or something, like you said earlier. Yeah, so let's just finish with the friends questions. So let's see, I have a first one here from, so I think this person's name is Aga from Everyone on Boards. So that's an organization that works around skateboarding, snowboarding and surfing, not just skating, and mobilizing young people and families around it. So the questions are, let's see, what is missing in the London skate scene? And the second question is, what do you think about inclusion in skateboarding? Is there work to be done, and what else needs to be done? Interesting. Good questions, Aga. What's missing in the London skate scene? Well, my goodness, House of Vans is missing in the London skate scene. We desperately miss an indoor space, but we also desperately miss that as a meeting point. There was something so incredibly special, and I think I met Aga there, or we used to hang out there. There was something so special about what could happen in that space in terms of bringing people together. And I wouldn't have known that there was a kind of girls' skate night scene had it not been for the events that were put on at House of Vans. So we're missing that at the moment, and I think that's having an impact on different communities. There was a sense during lockdown, we were very much, from my perception, very much all together, all doing this thing that we loved and finding a way to do it
in our hour of exercise a day kind of stuff and where we could around the edges. And then once lockdown eased and the pressure was back on skate parks, it felt a little bit like there's a kind of vying for space, vying for who's got the right to be here more than others. And that for people who are nervous about or just beginning, often it's beginners, and by that I mean all kinds of beginners, not just girls or women beginners, but I've met a lot of beginners identifying in different ways. When you are nervous, you need a bit of designated space, and we used to get that with House of Vans, and at the moment I don't really see very many, certainly no permanent. There's some great one-off projects happening, but there isn't anything permanent that does a regular programme that combines kind of girls' night on a Thursday with an open skate on a Friday and another thing on a Saturday, and this sense of a rolling community was really important. What was Aga's second question?
It was about inclusion in skateboarding.
Yeah.
It's kind of a vast question, but and basically what else would need to be done, kind of.
Well, it is a vast question, and it's an important question. I think I approach it in two ways. One, I've talked about earlier on in our conversation, in the problems that I saw with the inclusion initiatives that were happening in cultural organisations like museums and galleries.
Yeah.
Where there's an establishment or the institution that says, these people are already coming, part of our audience, but these ones over here, they're not coming. So let's bring those people in. And I do find there's a problem with that. Now, skateboarding avoids that, and I'm always pleased that skateboarding avoids it, because you can't bring somebody in. They've got to choose for themselves. You can't make someone skate. They have to have made that decision for themselves. So people include themselves. But then there needs to be open spaces in which that's possible. And we've talked about this a lot in terms of the events that we put on at City Mill Pool Street. Because on the one hand, we started off and we did a girls' jam. That was a way that we thought we would open up and make sure that we were encouraging women in skateboarding. And then the more we talked about it, the more we thought, well, actually, that's not quite the world that we want to create. Inclusion is about, for me, creating the world that you want to live in. And I don't want to live in a segregated world. I want to live in an inclusive world. So somehow we are trying to organise our events that both support and promote people who maybe feel less part of the core scene and maybe more periphery to that, and saying, it's okay, come, take up space, you are welcome, we want to see you here. But on the other hand, not making that segregated from the rest of the skate scene. So we're trying to do events that have got, for example, Cash for Tricks, which would, and have in the past with other things, traditionally attracted more of the younger boys who are skating in the area who want to come for that. Not entirely, but it attracts a mainly male competitor for that. And I want to see events that have that, but they also have a coach being on hand for a bit of the day for some people that want some support. And basically, I'm trying to create the events that I've been to at House of Vans. I'm taking my cultural point of reference from that, and I'm trying to bring it into a different space, because that's the world that I want to live in. One in which there's a kind of mutual respect and noticing. I think at the end of the day, we all want to be noticed. We all want to be seen. Back to that invisibility thing. And I think if we can create events and spaces for skateboarding in which different skateboardings are seen, skateboarding with an S on the end, it is not just one thing anymore. I suspect it never was, but certainly at the moment it means different things to different people. And
definitely.
I think there should be space. I would hope that there would be space for all those different skateboardings. That's good. Great question, Aga, because that's forced me to put words to something that I've been thinking about for a while and not actually articulating. So I think that's probably the first articulation of those ideas, and I will kind of develop that.
Exactly. All right, the next question I have is an audio question.
Hi, Esther. I'm really looking forward to hearing your conversation with Quentin. I'm not sure if you're aware, but you've been an amazing inspiration, and continue to be an amazing inspiration for me. And I've got a question for you. So when you started skateboarding at the age of 47, did you have a particular goal in mind did you want to achieve something in particular? And now you've been skating for some years. Has that goal changed? Look forward to hearing you. Cheers.
That question was from Josh Sutton from Red Fez Books.
Thanks, Josh. Great question. Yeah, Josh is definitely somebody who knows what it feels like to start late in life. We share that way of becoming involved in skateboarding. Did I have a goal in mind? Well, I think, that thing about just wanting to just skate down the street. I wanted to boil it down. I wanted to have a ride. Mm-hmm. I had a motorbike for a while. I've always liked off-road mountain bike type things. I had done a little bit of skiing. I didn't do that till I was 39, but I'd done a bit of that. I like the feeling of the ride. And so that was all I wanted. It just began and ended there, really. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to ride and not fall off. Yeah. But that didn't last for very long because I was drawn on by that incremental gain of learning a new thing. And now that I'm here, well, I've had a bit of a wobble since all of those hand surgeries. It's been quite difficult to get my confidence back with dropping in. Yeah. And because I like to skate bowl, I like to cruise around the bowl, that's absolutely essential to me in terms of the skateboarding that I want to do. So I've really been kind of working through that fear and nervousness, and I think I'm pretty okay now. Need a bit of mind over matter, but I'm all right. So to keep my drop in, to kind of keep that there, is where that goal has changed to, and now it's to be higher, faster, those kinds of things, the sort of thrill of getting into a big bowl at speed and being able to kind of hold it and find a line and pump and build power. And I guess my goal now is all around pumping and all around keeping speed. I'm still just trying to have a ride, just to keep the ride going for as long as possible.
Yeah. Okay, this next question is from Sander Hölsgens that you're going to see pretty soon, apparently. He said, usually we talk about the kinds of things we learn from skaters, but what can we as skaters learn from non-skaters? How can we be better? Thought that was an interesting question.
It's a really interesting one. I think what always comes to mind for me is to do with the way that when we're really, really into something, it can sometimes make us a little blinkered to other things. And I think if skaters are going to learn anything from non-skaters, although saying that, it might be that non-skaters also are blinkered, but in something else. But I think that thing of always being in something, but always being able to see out and what's on the horizon, and to kind of be able to take that thing, the essence of the thing that you love, into lots of different situations and use it. But I'm more answering the question, taking skateboarding out into the other world. I'm trying to turn it around in my head. No, let me come back to it.
Okay,
Quentin.
sure.
It's one of those ones that will just bubble away.
Maybe something will come to mind.
I think it will.
I have another audio one.
Hello, Esther. We met at Pushing Borders in Malmo while skating around Folkets Park with Paul O'Connor. The magic of skateboarding in a nutshell. We had never met prior, but we knew that we wouldn't have been in that space or that time if it had not been for our mutual respect and passion for skateboarding. We had the spot and also Soren's skate sculptures to ourselves. I really enjoyed that moment. Quite nice way to round off the first day of talks from Pushing Borders. Anyhow, I have a series of shortish, kind of interrelated questions for you. Continuing the spot theme, I'm hoping that you could describe the participatory design process behind the City Mill Skate Spot project. That's my main question, but I'm also interested to know if any further spots or dots are being planned. For my second question, I'd like to ask you if you think the pandemic had a positive effect on, quite specifically, the North London skate scene. I visited Hackney Bumps on a sunny autumn afternoon in 2022. Everyone who arrived at the park made a point of saying hello and introducing themselves. I've never experienced this before. It's such a welcoming space, such a nice thing to do. I distinctly got the impression that the pandemic somehow galvanised and energised the skaters to bring about change. Is that fair to say? That's it from me. Thank you. Keep on doing what you're doing. I hope our paths cross again soon. Bye.
Did you recognise who that was?
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely. I'm just useless with names, and I can see him. I can see him exactly there, and I can see his Instagram, and I know that he's working in architectural design, and I know that he's partly based in Denmark and has been based in London, and I know that he appears as one of the questions in Gustav's interview I listened to yesterday.
That's right, yeah.
And in a minute, his name will come to me. Oh my God, you'll get to know about this when you're in your 50s. This is what your brain
I'm already in there.
That's driving me crazy, and I can't use my phone to remind me.
That's okay. This is David Gough.
Yes! Thank you. Yeah. And then I can spell Gough, and sorry. No disrespect there, David, at all. Thank you for your question, your collection of questions.
Yeah.
Nice questions from somebody who is very much involved in the same area of design, I think, and whose work I admire very much. Yes, the participatory design process. I sort of feel quite slightly uncomfortable saying, we did invent a process so that for City Mill we could find out what lots of people thought. That was important, that we developed a process that would allow us to do that. When I say I feel slightly uncomfortable about participatory design, I'm not claiming it. We didn't invent participatory design. It's been around for a long time. A lot of user-centred design and co-design has come from Scandinavia, and particularly out of the Scandinavian cultures. And in a way, skateboarding has always had participatory design as part of it, because this is how DIY obstacles get built.
Yeah.
What we did with City Mill was we put it in, created a process around it, because a lot of skate spaces grow through the process of consultation. It is part of the local authorities' planning process that people need to have been consulted. And so often that consultation happens through a series of meetings or workshops even, and people's ideas are brought together and something is designed that speaks to those ideas. But as somebody who is very, very keen on doing things through practice and doing things through materials, I'm really keen that people don't just use words, that they're doing to speak, to say what they would like. So when we were working with Daryl and Betong and we developed that relationship, and suddenly it's like, oh yeah, you think the same. You're coming to the same place, but you're coming from DIY skateboard builds, and I'm coming from the art classroom and the art studio, and we're arriving at this same spot where people can speak through materials. This is really interesting. And so then once the pandemic got announced, just as we were about to do some very practical workshops around building skate dots that would be kind of DIY build type things, and then the pandemic was announced and we couldn't go into doing those, Sam Griffin and Daryl and I stood outside of the Bartlett building on the Olympic Park going, shit, what do we do now? We don't want to just park this project and put it on hold.
Yeah.
So then we very quickly came up with the idea of having kits that we'd send out, and we talked about what we'd put in those kits, what the kind of ingredients would be. And they were all about how can we get people to design but through making. Because for a bit we thought, should we get people just to go off and photograph the spots they like to skate or obstacles that they've encountered in the wild and that they'd like. And that would have been a good way of going, but it wasn't enough. We wanted it to be tactile and tangible and have a material quality to it. So it wouldn't have happened that way. Our process wouldn't have happened that way if it hadn't been for the pandemic. David asked about how the pandemic had affected skateboarding in my bit of London.
Yeah.
And that's a lovely recollection from coming to the bumps.
Yeah,
it's so nice to hear that, and it resonates so strongly with me, that sense of going into somewhere and being welcomed.
Yeah, even though you're not local or like a regular or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, again, that kind of having lived in Hackney for 20 years already before that point, the reason that we moved to Hackney was because we saw a culture and a spirit in this part of London that we used to jokingly call it the People's Republic of Hackney, because Hackney has always had this kind of people first, people power essence
mentality,
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always been a place where people have changed their communities for the better,
Okay.
I think. And so when I saw the Bumps project happening, it was like an enactment of all these values that I'd actually seen in the area for so long.
Yeah.
So that sense, and David mentioned that skaters being galvanised to bring about change as a result of the pandemic. And that, I reflect on this a lot. I think somehow the way that the pandemic focused us in on our local areas and asked us to question what role we played there when we sort of couldn't play our roles, our normal roles.
Yeah.
We were asked to reconsider who we could be, and also we were asked to behave in a way that was mutually caring for the benefit of our society. It was outside of just for the benefit of yourself.
Yeah.
And we were forced to think about others and how we could both protect others and also how we could support others in this kind of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so those things meant change almost naturally came out of that sense of the People's Republic, a change that needed to happen, us all really needing the outdoor spaces in our local area because they were our lifeline. They were keeping us sane. They were giving us somewhere to do this hour of exercise that we were allowed to do that could allow us to see our community when we couldn't interact closely with our community and we couldn't go to any of the other spaces where people would socialise. So all that meant there was a focus on, I suppose, the infrastructure of the community or just a real incentive for people to come together to make their space better, our community, to make improvements for our community. And I think that mindset galvanised the kind of changes that happened at Hackney Bumps. And then once some people start, it's great because that kind of altruistic activity actually gathers other people around it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it creates an energy that's come out of the community and is for the community, which is very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Something that was the absolute antithesis of that, which is perhaps worth mentioning because there was a point that really affected me later on down the line. We were trying to develop the plans for Hackney Bumps, and the council had got some money to do regeneration of Daubney Fields, which is the area around Hackney Bumps, and as part of that they wanted to do several meetings, and I went along to a couple of the meetings as the Hackney Bumps representative, very much wanting to make sure that we were part of these regeneration plans, that nothing was going to be done to us by a bigger project, but also we had really great plans for extending our space and creating a learning space called Baby Bumps outside of Hackney Bumps. And I was also, so I thought maybe we could do that as part of this project. I was also, and still am, really conscious that there are no toilets anywhere near us. And that's a real problem. That's particularly a problem for girls and women that come and skate there. It's just a situation that needs fixing. So I wanted to go along to these meetings to see if I could influence change to happen in that area. And at the second of the meetings, somebody that worked for one of the local organisations started to say that Hackney Bumps wasn't inclusive, that it was this terrible space where skateboarders had been really rude to children and adults that had been there and had made them feel not welcome and all of these. And I literally sat there and sort of rocked back in my seat because I had a kind of 10-minute tirade from this person about how unwelcoming the Hackney Bumps was. And it was absolutely opposite to all of the experiences that I've had and that David's just alluded to. And so really shocking to hear. And I didn't feel in that context that I could come back with anything because I kept trying to interject and say, but that's really not what was meant there. And I tried to argue back, but that was falling on deaf ears. So I actually stopped and just thought, I can't do anything in this context. I'll come back at some other time. And it turned out that the person that was being aggressive had a small child or small children, and they used to bring them to the bumps, and the kids used to use the ramps, particularly the big quarter, as a slide. happens quite often in skate parks.
Sure.
You see small children who haven't got skateboards or any other wheeled thing using it as a slide. And they're just playing, and the play park's next door, and you can understand it. But skateboarders were going up and saying, you might get hurt if you stay there. And also, I've only got an hour to skate. I want to use that. Can you go and use a play park next door? So there was that sudden clash of needs within the thing and clash of understanding. And she was coming from a situation of not understanding that and having taken it in a different way than I feel it was meant.
Yeah.
So a kind of collision of worlds and a collision of expectations for who could use the space and how the space could be used.
Yeah.
I didn't react well. I found it rocked my world and what I thought we were doing at Bumps. Really, it rocked it so much because she was not quite as old as me, but she was kind of more of my generation and she had kids, and so there was quite a few ways in which we identified with each other, and yet at the same time had this such a different view of what was going on there,
or vision of it.
And I don't know why this was my reaction, but I couldn't skate at Bumps for at least 6 months after that event. And I do not know why to this day, and it's not to do with all of, we had such a nice crowd down there, but it had suddenly burst the bubble. It had suddenly made me feel like there was this nasty edge to things that I hadn't been able to see before. And that was a while ago, and I don't feel that that's actually taken root or infiltrated. I think there's been a levelling. I think after lockdown, there was quite a lot of grumbling and grumps, and people had to kind of fight for space and renegotiate how to be in the world together. And I think that was part of that. But I think that's where we can really see, we as skaters came together to bring about change in our local area. What's even more difficult is then how you extend that to non-skaters to be part of that change. Because when something happens to you, you are less likely to be involved and to feel ownership of it and feel a sense of belonging than if you've been part of it. And I think that's quite significant in that. And that's always the case with a new skate space or a new anything, really. How it then is integrated into the wider community is really crucial. How people interact with the space and the communities that have built up there.
Yeah, I'm sure that happens all over. I think Leo Valls from France. Yeah. Every summer he organizes skatable sculpture exhibitions in Bordeaux. And the purpose is to basically create in French I would say un spot éphémère, like an ephemeral spot, I guess, or something that's not going to stay, basically. It's just there for a couple months. And the purpose of it is to be skated, but it's also for people to admire and engage with however they want. So if kids want to play on it, slide on it, whatever, it's all acceptable, you know what I mean? And I don't know, it just made me think that, of course, children that don't have a skateboard and that see an incline want to just slide on it, and that's, I understand that they would want to do that, but at the same time, I understand that a skater is I'm trying to skate here, you're in my way, kind of. And it's hard to have these two separate kind of entities, inhabit the same place or something. Share the same space.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, we have to not try and look for a solution or they're right and they're wrong kind of thing. Yeah. But it's more a job of allowing
compromise,
of hearing each other. Sometimes we don't hear each other, or sometimes we don't see the way that other people are interpreting what's happening around there. Yeah. And I think that was why that situation was so shocking to me, because I like to think I'm quite good at seeing and reading the tea leaves and picking up what's going on, and I completely missed that one entirely, and so it kind of shocked me that I hadn't been able to see that there was a problem. But sometimes that happens and we have to kind of rejig after that. And I have heard Leo talking on that subject, and I heard him talking on something about the use of the various obstacles,
Skate
dots
obstacles,
that they've created in Bordeaux, and I was listening with interest because it was kind of part of the same problem. But that certainly with the City Mill skate dots, our intention was that they could be used in whatever way the person saw fit.
Yeah.
Slightly different within a designated space like Hackney Bumps.
Yeah.
It's not like you're encountering these things in
it's
a public
not in the
place.
middle of exactly.
Yeah, it's slightly different, but these are really nuanced kind of expectations about the way that we use the kind of objects that we encounter.
Right, absolutely.
In the world, so yeah.
All right, the next question I have is from Iain Borden. So he said, how do you balance your own personal enjoyment of skateboarding with your more academic and activist practices? Do you sometimes try to keep the former separate from the latter?
Yeah, very good question. And with a certain amount of difficulty, I have to say. Yeah, it's true. It is, I do need to separate them out, for sure. And yeah, sometimes I'm just got so much going on in my head that it's really difficult to then go skate. It'll be a really sunny afternoon. I'll be going, I could just make an hour, and then I can't switch off the kind of whirring head to go and do it. And frankly, skating, if I'm not able to switch my head off, is frankly dangerous because I'm not really in it.
Focus.
So I don't like to do that. And actually, the most amazing thing for me in the past few months that's helped with that has been the meetups that I have with London Skate Mums. We are a group of maybe 30 or 40 women, all parents, who meet and skate. And somehow that space has stayed precious and special and separate to me. And I'm able to just leave everything else at the door and go and just be absorbed in that moment. Yeah, absolutely. And I keep thinking with my academic head on, this is just so wonderful. I really want to interview all these women. and I keep saying to people, I'd love to do an interview. And then there's another part of me that's going, just don't, because you'll spoil it.
Yeah.
And it's so precious that, at the moment it's remaining that precious space. I guess the beauty of skateboarding is that way in which everything else drops away, and the being in the moment with the body and the board and the environment and the ground, and it allows for nothing else. So once in that space, it's easy. I don't have to work at it. It's just getting out of the door,
getting there,
standing up from this desk and putting 2 feet on the board for the first time. Once 2 feet are on the board, which is usually just over the road on that bit of pavement, and then I have a hill bomb, and by the end of the hill bomb, that's it. I'm in it. I'm in that zone. But that first hurdle is the hardest one, and all sorts of things must happen during that, which are about switching off and leaving behind. And I think quite often during City Mill, I would end up skating, and then I would end up seeing somebody that I needed to talk to because of the project. And then I'd be skating and having a kind of work conversation. And that is really hard for anybody who works in skateboarding. And I'm sure lots and lots of us kind of identify with that sense that you're kind of always working.
Yeah.
I think, again, maybe that's why the Skate Mums space is such a safe one for me, because I'm not working with any of those people. I am there purely for pleasure.
Yeah, that's rad. I read this article that you sent me on I don't remember what it was called, but it mentioned the Skate Mums meetups and stuff, and it seemed like a really rad, events or like a community, and it seems like it's a good place for you right now, at least somewhere that you enjoy, and you can kind of be in the moment and not necessarily go there as with work in mind, I guess.
Yeah. At the beginning of skateboarding, it was really important to me to skate to work. And I can't skate all the way. I have to skate to the train station and then I skate on the other side. But that process of skating right up to the doors of my office building and then stepping off my board, walking through the door and beginning my day, that was a really useful tool for me, because it meant I started my working day on my terms.
Yeah.
I started with skateboarding, and then everything else was okay. Whatever happened, I could deal with that, because at the end of the day I would get back on the board and ride away. And so it really was very much a functional tool, as much as all of the joy parts. It was a functional tool in a kind of resistance. And I think politically, and as in a sort of activist way, that kind of skateboarding as a way of resisting some of the norms or expectations, it's always been really important to me in that sense.
This reminds me of 10 years ago or so, I lived and worked in New York City for a couple of years. And I tried coming to work on my skateboard. At the time, I had already had my injury that I talked to you about. But I could roll around. So I skated to work from Brooklyn, where I lived, to Manhattan, where I worked. So it was a long, like 30-minute skate or something, and across the bridge and stuff. It was amazing. I loved it. And one day I came to work, and my boss basically told me, like, never show up to work like this. Like, not using those terms, but that was basically what he said, because I was like sweaty, and I was wearing a t-shirt, and I had, I don't know, like and it was a kind of a very serious kind of environment. Everybody was kind of suited up, and so I was definitely kind of pushing the limits of what was acceptable in that work environment. And he told me, like, you're taking this too far, like the skateboard, the sweating, the t-shirt, like, no, like tomorrow I want to see you with a shirt. And so I couldn't skate to work anymore, but I was bummed. I don't know, this just reminded me of what you were talking about.
That's so interesting, and it makes, just thinking about you going across the bridge from Brooklyn to Manhattan. I told you at the beginning of our conversation about making the skate ramp outside Tate Modern, and being kind of bummed that we hadn't been able to skate in the Turbine Hall. Much later on, and after I'd left and finished my PhD, and I was going for an event at Tate Modern, and I skated over from St Paul's over the Millennium Bridge to Tate, and there was something so vital about the wheels made across the Millennium Bridge, and then skating across the horrible gravel that's outside Tate Modern where the ramps would have been, and then to the building, and then standing there and being told by security, you can't bring that in. And it was kind of like this is ridiculous. You have no idea that 15 years ago I was paid by this institution to actually build a skate ramp outside here. And so I stood there like real cross. I was meeting my master's students in there to actually do some teaching. So I needed to get in because the students would be on their own for this trip otherwise. And I was greeted with something that lots of people will be familiar with about the security going, just no help whatsoever. Can I put it in the cloakroom? No. Can I put it in a locker? No. Can I come in? No. So I'm going, what am I going to do? I've got these students in here, and he's going, you'll have to go and see if one of the cafes will let you leave it there. So I went over to a cafe and stood there. There's loads of people in there. I'm thinking, I can't just leave it in here. This is my pride and joy. I'm not leaving my skateboard randomly. So thankfully, because I'd worked there, I knew that there was a staff entrance, and I went round to the staff entrance and said to them, can I leave my board here? I can't get into the gallery. And thankfully, somebody that recognised me said, yeah, fine, just put it here. And I thought, well, that's fine for me with all my cultural capital to be able to negotiate that. But if I was one of the young people that the gallery so wanted to bring in, and I'd been faced with that, I'd have just turned around and walked away. So that was also coming up against, like you were saying with your story, just like, no, this is the convention of this organisation, and you are exceeding what we think is acceptable behaviour, and therefore go away and do it in a different way, or come in and do it in our way. Later on, I was part of an event upstairs in Tate, in a space called Tate Exchange, where I actually got to ride my skateboard across the beautiful wooden floor of the gallery. And it felt like I rode the board for 15 seconds max, but there was something so important to me about riding on the floor of the gallery that I fought so hard to get young people to be able to ride in and failed. There was a kind of slight coming home. I feel like the story's maybe not quite finished, and I hope that maybe in the future I can kind of chip away at that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Certainly very conscious of those institutional barriers that are presented to us sometimes, and skateboarding is a kind of activism. Just doing it, just in and of itself, it is a form of activism.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I have a couple more. Let's do this one.
Hey Esther, really looking forward to hearing the podcast. I have a question for you about skateboarding and learning and what translates from skateboarding and what doesn't. Sometimes in skateboarding you hear people talk about how skaters try a trick 100 times and they learn to accept failure and try again. And how, if that translates to the rest of life, then skateboarders will just be amazing. The problem is that, in my experience, skateboarders that try a trick 100 times don't necessarily apply that to other areas of life because they feel engaged and motivated by skateboarding and learning tricks, but they don't feel motivated by maths, for example. And so rather than applying those skills, they gravitate to skateboarding as an escape from maths. And also skateboarding culture kind of sometimes creates an alibi for this by being a sort of outsider culture. And that has its own benefits and places in society. But I'm interested to hear you reason about what does translate from skateboarding and what you have seen. And I'm sure this is part of what you'll be discussing today, but to hear your reason about what translates and what doesn't. So yeah, looking forward to hearing the podcast and to see you in Malmö soon. I've missed you the last few times you've been here, so hope to catch you next time. All right, take care. Bye.
Cool. Very good. Gustav, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, I thought so. Yeah. And yes, I have missed Gustav the last few times. Interesting, great question. And yeah, we do hear that whole thing about skateboarding and learning and failure.
Yeah.
And I have talked before about how important that learning to fail is, and it's definitely an important part of learning, not just about skateboarding, but any kind of learning. The better equipped we are to be able to fail, the better we will learn. And I love the way that Gustav has put that if you took that into all areas of life, then skateboarders would be incredible.
Would rule the world, yeah.
would rule the world. But actually, people use their own volition and choose otherwise and choose to stay within other areas and use skateboarding as a form of escape. And I think I was kind of talking about that a little bit in the answer to Ian's question. To do with, that kind of keeping the sanctity of the space that London Skate Bumps creates for my own escape.
Yeah.
But what does translate from skateboarding? And conversely, what doesn't? Well, I was very conscious right at the beginning of my skating when I used to skate with my son and some of his friends, and I was talking to one of the young people one time about school and about not wanting to attend school and how school created all sorts of stresses that meant that this young person just didn't feel like they could succeed, that they kept getting things wrong and they kept getting detentions and punishments from school for getting things wrong. And this young person told me that often on the way to school they would stop and sit on a wall and think about these things and just think, I can't go, and wouldn't go, and would end up missing school. And this conversation was very poignant to me because I knew this young person from skating at the weekends when they would literally keep going and keep going and keep going. And so I was thinking, what is this? Why do I see this person in this environment being able to pick themselves up and try again and try again and try again? And yet I hear about them in this school environment feeling they can't do that, and feeling even more so that they can't even go in to school because there is a danger of that happening to them.
Yeah.
And I've thought about that a lot over the years, and because I'm keen to think about what skateboarding was giving to that person that school wasn't. And I think a lot of it boils down to the kind of the self-creation of our learning in skateboarding, and the fact that in school, particularly the kind of learning activities that young people in the UK perhaps more than other places, have to learn towards particular qualifications or academic goals, and they're set by somebody else. So that whole sense of the person being the driver of their learning journey, their learning pathway, goes out the window, and you have to conform. You have to do it this way because this is the preparation that you need to pass these exams or whatever it is. And so taking away the autonomy for the individual from the learning journey seems to really detrimentally affect some young people. So if we translate something from skateboarding around skateboarding and learning, and we bring it into other academic environments, it would be that individuals need to drive their own pathway. They need to build the learning journey that they want to see. They need to feel, back to Hackney Bumps and ownership, they need to have some ownership of the learning that takes place. And I see that, just to give a little example, because I've been doing some research at Bryggeriet, and I see that at Bryggeriet in the way that the staff there kind of create a culture or an environment in which learning happens, which is a place in which individuals are respected for who they are and what they bring, but also given a certain amount of space and freedom in order to kind of enact their learning journey.
Yeah.
But it's not completely free. It isn't completely free. The staff have still got an eye on the bigger picture. So whilst they are engaged with the young people and what they are individually learning, the staff have also got one eye on how that young person and their learning event fits into this broader structure of the school and the expectations of the school. And I think that's a really good model, and mainstream schooling, i.e. not a skateboard high school, could learn a lot from Bryggeriet about the way that it's not just the lesson and the pedagogy in terms of the way that it's structured. It's also about the culture and the environment in which people learn. And if you look at the culture and environment of a skate park as a learning space, and the culture and environment of a standard classroom as a learning space, there are all sorts of differences, and there are some ways in which the standard classroom could really benefit from that approach to learners and their pathways.
Okay, let's do this one from Åsa Bäckström. Am I saying that right?
Åsa Bäckström. Yeah.
So, Åsa's question is, given your interest in embodied learning and knowing, what are your thoughts on bodily awareness? How would you explain the relationship between mind, body, and language? Polanyi says something like, you can know more than you can tell, i.e. your body is able to perform things that you have difficulty expressing in words. What could such bodily awareness look like in skateboarding? Lovely
thoughts about mind, body and language coming together. I was thinking, as you were asking Åsa's question, about the kind of knowing that happens in skateboarding, and the knowing that comes through the body when you stop having to think about it and you actually can do the thing. And I know we talk a lot about muscle memory and things, but that's not enough. That's not the whole of it.
Yeah.
There is something that happens that combines what we know in our brains, what we hear, what we feel, kind of what it looks like, but we can't really see ourselves performing. So we have this sort of experience of a performance that we can't see, which is why we document ourselves to the nth degree. But that kind of idea that you know when you've got it because of what it feels like or sounds like, much more than the other things. It made me think about those things.
All right, let's do this next one.
Hi Esther, I'm looking forward to visiting you in London next month for the City Mill Skate Colloquium. As you know, I'm a big fan of your work, always enthusiastic about what you write, and I enjoy your approach to writing about skateboarding. Tend to write in a very balanced and patient way, which contrasts with the speed and precarity of our skateboards. As we know, skateboarding is notoriously difficult to write about. I wanted to ask if you could share with listeners your approach to writing and offer some tips to others who are seeking to tell their stories of skateboarding. I would also love to know what your dream skate destination is. What place have you never visited but want to explore on your board? Send in all the best.
Brilliant. Oh, that's nice. Paul, right?
Yes, Paul O'Connor, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's funny. I sort of feel we kind of know each other really, really well, and yet have so little chance to actually be in the world at the same place at the same time. I'm so excited about the colloquium because it's bringing together all these people that we hung out in Pushing Borders and have seen each other a couple of times since. But it's good. Yes, thank you. That's really nice and very, very nice to get a positive response on my writing from someone as eminent as Paul O'Connor.
Mm-hmm.
I will try and respond to that because it's a good one. The process of writing is, I struggle with it. I come to writing as an artist. I didn't learn to write. I didn't do any academic courses where I had to really do very much writing until I started my PhD. So I kind of learnt to write during my PhD. So I think I've very much taken it. I love theory. I love to read theory. I love to read philosophy. I'm really interested in reading about ideas and then applying them to everyday situations. And I've done that in my writing about art, and also trying to do that in my writing about skateboarding, because I think philosophy and other forms of theory help us to think about the world in ways that are outside of the immediate situation. So they allow us to think about aspects of things that might join up or might connect each other. But because I like reading really difficult theory, I've always felt that my writing has to be approachable, it has to be accessible. And I don't mean dumbing it down or anything like that. I just mean writing things that actually have a rhythm to them, that do make you want to carry on reading, hopefully, that do incorporate theoretical ideas, but in a way that can be understood by the readership because I apply them to the practice that I'm talking about, whether that's art or skateboarding.
Mm-hmm.
It would bring it in that way. But it takes me ages and ages. The article that I wrote about ethics and skateboarding and time took me more than 2 years to finish in the end, and I'm currently working on a chapter for Sanders' new book.
Right.
And that's equally, it's not a straightforward process for me. I think I have to do it. Yeah. And I'm not very systematic. I have to write the things that are in my head, and then I have to try and structure them, which I'm sure makes it doubly difficult. But I'm just not. I've tried doing it in a very structured way, and it doesn't work for me. So you've got to do it in the way that it works and is generative. I feel like writing, because I write a lot of stuff that I call auto-ethnographic.
Yep.
It's very much about me telling a story, and I think it's through that telling a story that you keep someone with you. And if you stop telling the story or start to be inauthentic, by which I mean I might copy and paste something from something else into here, you can tell, you can feel it, you can feel that the attention has gone, and that doesn't work. So I think it just, for everybody, is a hard job, and you have to put the time in. So yeah, that comes. But it's nice to craft something that really says what you want it to, so it's worth the time in that respect. In terms of where do I want to skate?
Oh yeah, the dream skate destination.
I am. You're just going to think this is such a cliche, but I want to skate Venice Beach.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'd love to as well.
I just desperately want to go up and over those the kind of edges of that bowl, and there's plenty of roll in. There's some drop in. There's roll in. Oh, what an iconic place. I want to feel that Californian feeling. Not looking out to see whether there's a gap in the rain clouds or anything like that. I just feel that there would be a real sense of freedom there. But the other place that I really want to skate is Bryggeriet, and I'm going to get to go there next week. So.
Oh, nice. You've been already, I assume, right?
Yeah, I was there in September for a few days, and then getting to go.
Did you skate a bit, or
it was? They were just in that bit of the year where they're rebuilding the park, so couldn't skate in there. But we got to go to lots of other places. We got to go up to Lund, which was fantastic to skate there, and we got to go out to Sibarp. Oh my God, Sibarp is one of my favourite places to skate in the world. It's like Hackney Bumps on holiday. It's just absolutely lovely. And then to get to go and jump in the sea straight afterwards, because it's right there on the coast. It's absolutely perfection. So the list is endless. I was in Barcelona last summer, and that was fantastic.
Right. Yeah. That must have been fun. Yeah. So one giant skate park. Yeah.
Exactly, and I really want to extend that and go to Bordeaux and be able to have a similar kind of, just that stuff we were talking about before about skating just around. I feel that that's going to really lend itself to
Bordeaux is good for that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you have the Leo's thing that you showed me earlier to kind of guide you through it. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just got to get there. Just got to find a way to get there.
Yeah.
It'll happen.
I'm sure you'll figure out a way somehow.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I have two last ones. I have one from Indigo Willing from Australia.
Thanks, Indy.
So she asked, as a researcher, what is a skate finding that you'd like to translate and share to public?
A skate finding. That's nice.
Not sure what she meant by that, but...
Yeah, something that's come out of the research that I've been doing that I want to share with a wider world. And I'm just thinking about something that I haven't... What haven't I talked about? I think really it probably boils down to the kind of things that I've alluded to at various points in our conversation about inclusion and... What I found from researching skateboarding is a kind of culture in which learning is so embedded, so much at the heart of it, that it astounds me. Nobody really seems to notice that actually it's a learning activity all the time for everybody, no matter what stage they're at.
Yeah.
But this sort of sneaks along in the shadows because it's integral. And because learning is integral, it can offer so much to the rest of the world and society and culture in terms of the way that we learn through our whole lives, not just at school. You know, learning sometimes becomes reduced to something that you just do when you're a kid. And the opportunity with skateboarding to continually learn and to not need a teacher designated in order to do that learning, but to be able to pass the responsibility for teaching through the village, if you like, that we sort of take care of each other's growth and development, and we care for one another's growth and development. I remember really early on somebody saying to me something about, you know, at the end of a day skateboarding, don't just think about what you've learned, but think about who you've helped. And that idea that it is reciprocal, you have to think about what you do for skateboarding and what skateboarding does for you. And I think that kind of coming to understand that with the better kind of clarity or understand the nuance of that is something that it is still continuing to unravel for me in different situations. And I think there's so much to be learned that would really benefit and enrich other aspects of our society as... And when I talk about that, I mean that in terms of the way that we age, the way that we're continuing to become the person that we become through our 40s, 50s, through our 60s, for our whole lives. We are becoming someone. So skateboarding seems to have a handle on that in a way that most other activities don't. And that's partly because, and I know that Olympics is a contentious thing or that it sort of undermines what I'm saying, but it's because of a lack of competition in skateboarding. And by that I mean in everyday skateboarding, in the skateboarding that most of us engage with, there isn't competition apart from the competition with the self.
With yourself, exactly. Yeah. Okay, let's do the last one. So this one is a series of short questions from two different people, but I'm just gonna pause it question by question, okay?
Hi Esther, John Dahlquist here. In your research and your work, it's all about being objective, finding the data, and have a lot of solid arguments for your conclusions. We want to know your opinion and taste and take away all evidence. And me and your colleague have put together a couple of questions.
In case you were wondering who the colleague was, it is me, George. Hello, Esther. So I'm going to start off by asking you what your least favourite skate spot in London is.
Okay, I just paused for now.
Excellent. I don't know, I think I'd take John to task on that idea of all research being about objective and data-driven. In the practice research world, you have to acknowledge that often research is led by a hunch or a kind of speculation about something. So that comes much more that you're kind of subjectively involved in something and you're kind of responding to that inquiry through that involvement. But that's probably another question that we'll pick up somewhere along the way. Least favourite skate spot in London? Oh, definitely White Grounds. Oh my goodness. So White Grounds, it's outside of Hop Kingdom. If you've ever been to Hop Kingdom, indoor space, wooden ramps with a bar. And White Grounds is under the arches there. And I know that for my lovely friend Joseph, it's his favourite because it's exactly outside where he lives. For me, it's just filthy. It's the dirtiest space ever. And usually it's rained, and so there's water on the ground. It's underneath a railway bridge, so it's got that kind of black dust. It's familiar in so many skate spaces because they're often under railway bridges. Yeah. But it's also got a lot of litter and stuff. So because I'm so allergic to falling, I spend too long picking up rubbish before I can skate there. So I don't want to find that little bottle top that's going to take me out for the next month or so. So that's my least favourite to skate in spot. I think there's something about, I don't know, I often feel my most mum when I arrive at a skate spot and I have to do this,
clean it up, or
tidying out the bowl and sweeping out the bowl, and I tend to know where the brush is and things like that. But I just want to avoid that stupid injury.
For sure.
Good question.
Okay, let's do the next one.
And I really want to know what the worst trend in skateboard fashion is.
The worst trend in skateboard fashion. Well, I think there's one just about to hit over this summer, and I think it is the 90s jort. I love these shorts, and I own a pair myself, and I enjoyed skating with them last year and enjoyed. Well, I didn't actually wear them in the 90s. I was wearing different things then. But I think this is because it's just weird, isn't it? When you can remember the thing the first time round.
Yeah.
If you see people wearing the vintage version, then you're like, oh, yeah, right, that's nice to see that back again. But I have seen the new version.
Imitations.
And then it sort of sticks in your throat a little bit. And that's only just because I'm ancient. So nobody should take offence about their wardrobe in that. But that's obviously going to be one that I'm going to struggle with a little bit.
All right.
And I want to know your intellectually favourite skater. So who's the most intellectual skater out there?
That's a funny one.
Interesting. Well, you see, that's really hard for me because there's quite a lot.
There's a bunch, yeah.
Exactly. So first in my head was Ted Barrow.
Oh, I thought of him as well, yeah.
Because, and I've listened to Ted's interview that you did, and I think one of the things I'm particularly interested with Ted is because he comes from the art gallery, art history kind of world as well. So we're quite different in the way that we've navigated that space and understand that space because we're in quite different areas of it. But I find that really interesting to kind of have those conversations with Ted. And I met Ted at Pushing Borders. Enjoyed talking. But then I immediately replaced Ted with Carl Beachy because Carl brings that kind of storytelling that leads you into a sort of philosophy around skateboarding and opens up an understanding. But then I've got my bookshelf up here. There's just so many people. Paul's just asked that question, Paul O'Connor. And then as soon as I get to Bryggeriet, I will be engaged in conversations with John Dahlquist, which draw all of this kind of philosophical thinking around skateboarding. So we are blessed with a lot
some brilliant minds,
different thinking, and then going into the activist and sociological space where Indigo Willing is writing and doing all of these kind of projects, and then through Sander into anthropological study.
Danny Abulhawa.
And Danny absolutely gets so much out of her writing, which brings me back to practice. And I always enjoy the way that she engages with performance practice through skateboarding. So, yeah, define intellectual, George, I guess.
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to define it on loads of different terms. I can't, never ask an academic for a short answer to anything.
Okay, let's see.
And I want to know what the ugliest trick in skateboarding is, according to you.
The ugliest trick. Now, this won't be popular.
If you say backside tail slides, you're gonna get some hate messages.
Yeah, totally. No, I find, well, it's because I watch people learning it all the time and the pain that comes with learning it. I've learned to hate kickflips because I watch the struggle. So the struggle is hard and the struggle is ugly. And then I know from everybody I know that's achieved it, and obviously it's never going to be on my list, or maybe not obviously, but it's not going to be on my list because I've got other things that come before that. And I guess, but it's not as beautiful for the amount of grief that it causes people. It isn't as beautiful as it ought to be. I think I guess I'm coming from, I really like those kind of really dancey things. Dancey moves. I like alley-oops. I like lots of things that come off of shove-its that are derivations of a shove-it. I like things that kind of make the body perform, and the kick flip doesn't really make the body do anything. It makes the board do something.
Well, just a flick, but yeah.
Yeah. So I know that won't be popular because I know it's very, very important for many people. It's a huge achievement.
Yeah, well, I guess a lot of people would say something that looks a bit awkward, like a dolphin flip or like a Casper flip or stuff like that. That looks a bit weird. That is technically difficult. So I guess you get points of like achieving something difficult. Yeah, but it looks a little strange, or But I don't know.
Well, you're into a nuance that I can't possibly enter into there with that dolphin flip.
Well, I'll send you a video of a dolphin flip.
Please do.
Yeah. It's a weird one. Yeah.
Maybe I'll add it to my list of things
exactly. Ugly
not to do.
Never to do. Yeah. But some people actually do some pretty decent ones. But like 99% of people doing dolphin flips will look terrible. But a couple people can pull it off. But
There's something good. You got me now thinking about really lovely ones. There's something that Stephanie Nerdy's been doing recently, where she comes in. I don't know if she comes in fakey. It's like coming into a bowl, but slightly backwards and slightly on an angle. And there's just a beautiful flow about it.
Yeah.
So, I'm into the flow, and so I guess I'm less into the flick.
Yeah. Okay.
And I want to know, when you finally put a part together, where would you film it and what soundtrack would it have?
Very interesting. Well, I would love to film it at Sibarp. That Sibarp, I was there for a couple of hours. I could kind of spend days there. In fact, I looked at the campsite next door and thought we could have a family holiday camp next to Sibarp. I don't know that I'd see very much of the family, but I would love to put a part together there. What soundtrack would I use? Well, I'm always drawn to X-Ray Specs. That is playing in my ears quite often when I'm skating. The voice of polystyrene kind of blazing out over some kind of line, trying to catch all of the different obstacles at Sibarp would be an absolute joy to create. And there's something about that part where it's really fast. There's a lot of ways of gaining speed, so I feel like you could get something going that would have the speed that the X-Ray Specs music rolls to.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, well, looking forward to that part.
Oh shit! I might have to sign
now that you just
up
announced it, you have 2 months to film it. No, let's give you a little bit more time.
Excellent. Yeah, maybe just 3 or 4. Yeah.
And who's your favorite skater of all time?
That's very tricky.
Yeah, it's always hard to say just one person.
It is, and as soon as you start thinking about it, and you can't pick up Instagram and go, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, I love to watch. I'm trying to think, because there's people that I really love watching, like Lola Tamling, who is kind of a young person doing a lot of bowl skating at the moment and doing kind of Olympic-y type stuff. But I love watching Lola because of the style that she brings to it.
Okay.
Jordan Thackeray would definitely be high on my list.
Oh, yeah. Jordan Thackeray, is he that guy who skates like transition and does crazy tech tricks like backlip, shove it, weird kind of combination things?
Skates in a beautifully inventive way and also always wears something beautifully inventive as well. So there's just something, I think with Jordan, I'm also speaking about the same sort of thing that I'm talking about that Lola has going on, which is about bringing a gorgeous style.
Flavor.
Yeah, style and flavour to it. And then I'm actually going to say somebody who skates bumps and skates in my local, but is absolutely one of my favourite people to watch, who is Sol Dariwal. To watch is just a joy, an absolute joy to watch somebody who is, kind of dancing and skating at the same time.
Okay.
So, like we were talking about earlier, my points of reference come from my immediate community.
But I love that,
And often people that I know have met who've skated around me rather than from
a skate video.
From YouTube.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that so much because if I were to pick someone, I would think of videos I've seen on Thrasher or videos that I've seen when I was growing up or whatever.
From videos, Marby Princess, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because their skateboarding, ruining skateboarding, was just a life changer for me.
I loved her part specifically. Like the whole video is fun and great, but and I loved the music, the Boy Harsher song they used for her part. Mm-hmm. It was.
Again, invention. It's all about invention, I think.
Yeah. Okay, very, very last one.
And one book that all skaters should read, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about skateboarding either.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Good luck.
One book that all skateboarders should read, and it doesn't have to be about skateboarding.
Right.
I think it would have to be J.D. Salinger, Catcher in the Rye.
Okay.
I think that is a book about coming of age, and by that I don't mean you have to be a certain age to read it. I think we can all
relate to it, or
quite recently. Yeah, there's just something really lovely about the way that the journey of life unfolds, and I feel it's got many connections to the kind of grasp towards an escape or freedom that we feel in skateboarding. And I think at this point then I can go back to Sanders' question, which was what comes into skateboarding, what can come into skateboarding from outside. That sense of an opening up, of a widening the perspective, and kind of keeping other art forms or other ways of being in the world and understanding the world kind of present and alive by staying connected to people in our lives who don't skate, or things in our life that are not skateboarding, means that if at some point we can't skate, which is going to happen to everybody for a short period and maybe for longer, we've got something to fall back on. I talked a lot to Ryan Lay about that when we were at Pushing Borders. It was really insightful conversations because, of course, as a professional signed skateboarder, that's not going to go on forever. And Ryan was being very reflective about the other things in his life, like studying for a master's and various other things that would make sure that there was other options. And I think that is really crucial. And I sort of don't feel as if skateboarding, particularly professional skateboarding, does enough to support that. I've talked to quite a lot of people who've been at the end of their professional career. I was talking to Neil Dans, who was a pro skater, and he's based in Liverpool in the UK. And Neil was talking about his transition from professional skateboarding into what he does now, which is coaching, and how it needed quite a lot of support and help in that process to give him another set of skills. that needs to be provided. You know, you can't necessarily rely on the individual to find that stuff for themselves. So I think all those things are about opening up to other ways of being.
Yeah.
And not staying stuck.
Okay. The book is Catcher in the Rye? Is that the title?
Catcher in the Rye, yeah. And the author is J.D. Salinger.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try to get a copy of it, yeah.
And then there's millions of skate books, but I know I was only asked for one.
Yeah.
But Tara Jepson's Like a Dog I also found really valuable. I'm showing it to you, but that doesn't work on a podcast, does it? No. It's a novel that involves skateboarding, but not only. But it's another one that's about a life journey.
What's the name of the author? You said Tara?
She's called Tara Jepson. She's, based in California. Okay. The book is Like a Dog, and it's got a beautiful picture of a kind of murky-looking but empty Californian pool.
Perfect, yeah. Well, let's wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Esther.
Great.
And thank you for bearing with me up until now. And thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it so much. And keep up all the amazing work you do and the projects you're involved in. And
Great. Thanks very much, Quentin. That's great. No, it's been fantastic to have this conversation with you. You really have a great way of kind of moving things along and around skateboarding.
That's it for my conversation with Esther. Follow her on Instagram at Esther Sayers. Go check out her skateboarding research work and projects she's been involved with. I'll put links up on my Linktree page to some of the ones we mentioned throughout our conversation. If you happen to be in London on Friday, May 17th, do yourself a favor and go attend the Common Ground Symposium at UCL East campus, where Esther will be one of the many rad panelists alongside Iain Borden, Chris Lawton, John Dahlquist, Sander Hölsgens, Paul O'Connor, and many more. Check out @CityMillSkate on Instagram to register and book your free tickets. Thank you for tuning in. See you soon for a new episode of Beyond Boards.